Picture an ocean of tall golden grass undulating beneath a bruised twilight sky. The horizon glows in fading shades of burnt orange and deep indigo, casting long, soft shadows that stretch across the endless rolling fields. Standing there, silhouetted against the breathless dusk, is a gentle ancient giant. 4 massive latticed arms reach upward, as if preparing to embrace the night sky. The air is perfectly still, holding the scent of crushed wheat and cooling earth. Then, a cool evening breeze begins to gather. It whispers through the heavy timber, grazing the canvas sails. Slowly, with a deep, resonating groan of weathered oak and settling stone, the great arms begin to turn. They carve vast, elegant circles through the twilight, sweeping down toward the earth and rising back up to the stars in a perfect hypnotic rhythm. With every rotation, the tension of the day unwinds. The rhythmic, heavy sweep of the sails cuts through the quiet air. A slow, steady heartbeat standing resolute in the center of a darkening world. As you watch the steady, sweeping rotation of these ancient wooden arms, you do not need to try to remember anything that follows. Your subconscious mind is a vast, beautiful library illuminated by the soft light of curiosity. It will effortlessly absorb these 101 truths while you drift, while you rest, while you surrender to the quiet. There is no test passed tomorrow, no effort required tonight. Just let go, and allow the gentle motion of the wind to carry these stories deep into your resting mind. We drift far back in time, away from the familiar silhouettes of the West, to the sun-baked, endless deserts of ancient Persia. Here, the earth is the colour of crushed terracotta, and the wind, known as the wind of 120 days, blows with an unrelenting, invisible power across the arid plains of Sistan. In this dusty, golden landscape, the very first windmills ever built by human hands emerge from the heat haze. They do not look like the towering stone structures of later centuries. Instead, they are low, rectangular buildings made of sun-dried mud brick. Inside these ancient earthy walls, bundles of dried river reeds are woven tightly together, creating vertical panels. When the hot desert winds rush through the mud brick tunnels, they catch these woven reeds, spinning a central vertical shaft. It is a quiet, rhythmic rustling of dry grass and shifting sand, a brilliant, simple mechanism turning the harsh, invisible force of the desert wind into a gentle, grinding motion, offering the gift of flower to a beautiful ancient civilization. From the dry, whispering sands of the east, we float on the atmospheric currents, following the wind as it travels across continents, transforming the technology it touches. The vertical shaft slowly shifts its orientation, laying horizontally across the top of heavy wooden towers, introducing the magnificent machinery of the traditional European windmill. Deep within the dark, timbered chest of these new giants, a miraculous transformation occurs. The invisible breath of the world is captured and concentrated, channeled through colossal, interlocking wooden gears. The largest of these is the brake wheel, hand-carved from solid, seasoned applewood or resilient oak. The wooden teeth of this massive wheel mesh flawlessly with a smaller secondary gear called a wallower. As they turn, the wood sings, a deep rhythmic thrumming that reverberates through the heavy floorboards. It is the sound of friction, of heavy timber gliding against heavy timber, coated in a fine layer of white flour or tallow to keep the movement smooth. This internal heartbeat, hidden away from the light of the sun, turns the chaotic energy of the storm into perfect cyclical harmony. Following the downward spiral of that immense wooden shaft, the gentle power is delivered to the very heart of the structure, the great millstones. Picture 2 colossal discs of French burr stone, each weighing over a ton, quarried from the earth and bound tightly with hoops of black iron. The lower stone, the bedstone, rests in perfect motionless silence. The upper stone, the runner stone, hovers just fractions of an inch above it, spinning with a heavy hypnotic grace. Golden grains of wheat cascade down from a wooden hopper, falling like soft, dry rain into the eye of the spinning stone. As the stone turns, the grain is drawn outward by centrifugal force, travelling through carefully hand-carved grooves known as furrows. The air here is thick and warm, smelling deeply of toasted earth and fresh flour. The sheer weight of the stone never touches the bedstone beneath it. Instead, it rides on a microscopic cushion of the grain itself, shearing the golden kernels into incredibly fine, powdery white snow that drifts into the wooden chutes below. Leaving the warm, dusty interior of the grinding floor, we emerge into a landscape transformed by water, travelling to the flat, verdant polders of the Netherlands. Here, the windmill takes on an entirely new heroic purpose. The sky is vast, painted with towering, dramatic grey clouds that reflect in the glassy surface of 1,000 canals. Along the grassy banks, a legion of windmills stands guard. They are not grinding grain, they are lifting water. These are the drainage mills, equipped with massive wooden scoop wheels that dip into the dark, cold waters of the low-lying bogs. With every slow, deliberate revolution of their sweeping sails, the great wooden wheel scoops up the heavy water, lifting it upward and spilling it over the wooden dikes into the higher canals. It is a symphony of splashing water and creaking timber. Without these tireless turning guardians, the vibrant green meadows and the colourful tulip fields would vanish beneath the tide. They are machines that literally pushed back the ocean, turning water into dry, habitable earth simply by catching the coastal breeze. These majestic Dutch structures often take the form of the smock mill, a design of breathtaking, rustic beauty. Imagine a towering octagonal structure built entirely of heavy timber framing, rising tall above the flat landscape. Its sloping sides are covered in horizontal weatherboards, painted in thick, glossy layers of tar or stark white lead paint to protect the wood from the biting sea spray. It flares outward at the base and tapers toward the top, closely resembling the silhouette of an old-fashioned farmer's linen smock. The architecture is a marvel of shipwright engineering, with heavy corner posts and intricate cross-bracing that allows the tall wooden tower to flex and give ever so slightly in the fiercest gales, absorbing the shock of the wind rather than fighting it. It feels alive, breathing and settling with the changing barometric pressure, a massive wooden ship permanently anchored in an ocean of green grass. Crowning the top of the smock mill and entirely separate from the tower below is the cap, a beautifully curved boat-shaped roof that houses the main windshaft. This heavily engineered timber cap is designed to be completely mobile, resting on a greased wooden track or a ring of iron rollers. Because the wind is a fickle traveller, constantly shifting its course across the sky, the sails must follow. In the older, quieter days, the miller himself would step outside into the damp morning air, grasp a massive angled wooden tail pole that extended down from the cap to the ground, and physically push. Leaning his entire body weight against the heavy timber, his boots digging into the soft earth, he would slowly rotate the entire roof of the building, turning the great sweeps until they stood squarely facing the oncoming breeze. The low rumble of the cap sliding on its greased track is the sound of humanity aligning itself perfectly with the forces of nature. But as the centuries drift by, a quiet, brilliant innovation arrives to relieve the miller of his heavy labour, known as the fantail. Picture a beautiful, intricate little star of white wooden blades, mounted high up at the very back of the windmill's cap, sitting at a perfect right angle to the massive main sails. When the wind blows directly into the main sails, the fantail hides in their aerodynamic shadow, completely still. But the moment the wind shifts, even slightly, it catches the edge of those small white blades. The fantail begins to spin, setting off a delicate chain reaction of small iron gears that slowly, automatically turns the heavy cap. It is a self-correcting organism, a building that senses the shifting atmosphere and continuously seeks out the strongest currents of air without a single human touch, turning its face to the wind like a massive wooden sunflower tracking the passage of the sun. To catch that wind, the great sails, or sweeps, must be dressed, a ritual of canvas and rope. The latticework of the arms is left completely bare when the windmill rests, resembling the skeletal structure of a great bird's wing. But when it's time to work, the miller climbs the wooden framework, unfurling long, heavy rolls of sailcloth. The canvas is thick, coarse, and bleached by the sun, smelling of hemp and the open sea. By pulling tightly on the rigging lines, the cloth is stretched across the wooden frame, catching the invisible air. If the wind is gentle, the sails are fully clothed, a solid wall of white canvas billowing softly against the blue sky. If a storm is brewing, the miller rolls the canvas back, reefing the sails to present less surface area to the angry gales. The rhythmic snapping of the taut canvas as the massive arms rotate is a sharp, percussive accent to the deep, resonant groans of the timber within. These towering white sails were not merely tools for catching the wind. They became a silent, visual language spoken across the vast, flat landscapes of the countryside. A windmill at rest still had a story to tell. If the miller stopped the sails in a perfect symmetrical cross, resembling a giant plus sign, it signalled a brief, temporary pause. Perhaps he was inside taking his midday rest, or oiling the great brake wheel. But if the sails were stopped in the shape of a tilted X, a St. Andrew's cross, it was a beautiful, solemn declaration that the mill was out of service for a long period, resting deeply, unbothered by the passing winds. In times of profound joy, the sails were stopped just before reaching the top centre, a position of rising action, signifying a birth in the miller's family or a local wedding. And in times of sorrow, they were stopped just past the top centre, descending, mourning the passing of a loved one. The windmill was the emotional compass of the village, standing tall against the horizon, reflecting the heartbeat of the people who lived in its shadow. Eventually we drift away from the weathered oak, the canvas, and the rolling green pastures, following the endless wind out over the dark, turbulent expanse of the open ocean. Here, standing miles from any shore, the ancient soul of the windmill has transformed into a sleek, towering monument of modern grace. The offshore wind turbine rises hundreds of feet into the salt-laced mist, a seamless pillar of alabaster white against the grey, churning sea. There are no wooden gears here, no heavy millstones, only 3 impossibly long, slender blades made of advanced fiberglass and resin, sweeping through the ocean air with terrifying, beautiful silence. They turn slowly, hypnotically, catching the raw, uninterrupted gales that howl across the water, converting the invisible kinetic fury of the sea wind into pure, glowing electrical light. Though their skin is made of smooth steel and carbon instead of tarred weatherboard, they are engaged in the exact same eternal dance, reaching up into the sky, embracing the wind, and turning the breath of the world into power for the people sleeping on the distant shore. The smooth, cold steel of the modern turbine melts away, dissolving softly into the thick grey mist of the past, giving way to the rough-hewn, comforting warmth of ancient seasoned oak. We find ourselves standing in a lush, emerald pasture, wet with the silver beads of morning dew. The air here smells faintly of crushed clover and old timber. Before us stands a marvel of early engineering, the magnificent post mill. Unlike the sturdy stone towers that stand deeply rooted to the earth, the entire body of this wooden giant is suspended in mid-air. It is a massive rectangular wooden house, heavily built and loaded with tons of machinery, heavy iron and massive grinding stones, all perfectly, impossibly balanced on a single, colossal, vertical wooden post. An upright tree trunk of staggering thickness, felled centuries ago and cured in the sun. This central post acts as a massive, quiet pivot point. When the wind changes direction across the grassy plains, the miller does not merely turn the roof, he must turn the entire heavy building. Using a long curved wooden tail pole that stretches from the back of the mill down to the soft earth, he pushes with slow, deliberate strength. The entire wooden house groans softly and shifts, rotating gracefully in a wide, sweeping arc around its central axis, a monumental act of balance that feels like a quiet, heavy magic. From this delicate, suspended balance, we begin to feel the immense weight of motion, the terrifying, beautiful power of the gathered wind. When the massive lattice sails are turning at full speed, driven by a rising, howling gale, they become a force of nature that must be tamed. To stop a giant in motion requires an elegant, brutal friction. Deep within the curving, dust-filled wooden cap of the mill, wrapped tightly around the outer rim of the massive main gear, is the brake band. It is a heavy, curving strip of flexible iron or thickly segmented wood, lined with tough leather or woven hemp rope. When the miller pulls the long, heavy brake rope hanging down through the floors, this band clenches down hard against the spinning wooden wheel. In the dim, golden light of the upper cap, the sheer friction generates incredible heat. A deep, agonizing groan of protesting timber echoes down through the heavy rafters. Sometimes, the intense smell of scorching applewood and hot iron fills the dusty air, and in the darkness, brilliant showering cascades of bright orange sparks fly from the crushing grip of the brake. It is a slow, powerful wrestling match between human ingenuity and the wild momentum of the sky, until finally the great arms yield, slowing to a quiet, breathless halt. The bright sparks from the heavy brake fade softly into a deep velvet night, a profound darkness that once covered the flat northern lowlands during the heavy, silent years of war. In this deep shadow, the resting sails of the windmill took on a new, secret life. They ceased to be merely tools of the harvest and became towering, silent sentinels of the resistance. The millers, intimately connected to the long horizons, used the precise stopping positions of the sweeping arms to broadcast hidden messages across the flat, occupied countryside, visible for miles in the grey daylight, yet completely invisible to those who did not speak the subtle language of the wind. A slight tilt of the heavy sails, just a few degrees past the perfect vertical, was an urgent, silent whisper sent across the fields. Danger is approaching, seek cover immediately. A different subtle angle meant the path was clear, or that a hidden safe house was open for the night. The great wooden machines stood boldly in the open meadows, speaking a brave, defiant code right beneath the heavy storm clouds, their stationary silhouettes serving as beacons of hope and survival in a darkened world. And as this secret, quiet knowledge settles softly into your mind, your own breathing begins to slow, sinking into a deep rhythmic pattern, matching the slow, sweeping passage of the passing wind, safe, secure, and deeply at peace. The dark, heavy clouds of the northern night gently dissolve, swept away by a warm, fragrant breeze that smells of salt and blooming oregano, revealing the blinding, crystalline blue of the open Aegean Sea. We are transported away from the damp earth, arriving on the sun-drenched, rocky cliffs of the Greek islands. Here, the architecture of the wind shifts dramatically. Against the vivid, endless azure sky, a row of squat, beautiful cylinders stands gleaming in the fierce Mediterranean light. These are the famous island windmills, painted with layers of thick, stark white lime wash that reflects the brilliant, burning sun, making them glow like dropped pearls against the barren, jagged rock. Their shape is perfectly round, designed to deflect the turbulent, swirling island winds that wrap around the cliffs. Atop these bright white towers sit pointed, conical roofs made of dark, woven thatch, resembling the rustic, golden hats of ancient fishermen. They face the shimmering sea directly, waiting for the famous Meltemi winds, the dry, powerful northern blasts that sweep across the water every summer. Their sails are not heavy wooden lattices, but simple triangular sheets of bright white canvas rigged to long, delicate wooden spars spinning rapidly like beautiful white pinwheels, grinding the sparse, hard grain of the island into life-sustaining flour. The salty, sun-baked air of the bright Greek islands dries and expands, stretching out into the vast, sage-scented emptiness of the American prairie. The colours of our journey shift from stark blue and white to endless rolling ribbons of dusty ochre, faded sage green, and the soft, bruised violet of a desert twilight. Standing tall and lonely above the arid scrubland is a very different kind of windcatcher, the multi-bladed wind pump. It is a slender, skeletal tower of galvanised steel, flashing flashes of silver and copper in the fading light of the setting sun. Instead of 4 massive canvas sails, it features a beautiful, dense rosette of curved metal blades, a mechanical iron flower blooming quietly in the desert. It requires only the faintest, most timid breath of evening air to begin its vital work. As the gentle breeze picks up, the metal blades spin with a mesmerizing, blurry speed. Below, a long, thin sucker rod drops deep into the dark, cool earth, drawing up freezing, crystal-clear water from hidden ancient aquifers. The rhythmic metallic squeak and clank, clank. Clank of the pumping mechanism becomes the soothing heartbeat of the lonely plains, a sound that promises cool water, green grass, and life spilling into a wooden trough in the middle of a beautiful, desolate expanse. Following the cool, clear water deep into the earth, we slowly return to the very heart of the ancient milling process, to the hidden, internal mechanics that require the most delicate, sensitive touch. Deep inside the dusty flour mill, beneath the deafening roar of the massive wooden gears, lies the tentering mechanism, a device of breathtaking, microscopic precision. The miller must constantly control the exact distance between the 2 colossal, ton-heavy millstones. If the stones touch, they will grind against each other, striking terrifying sparks and filling the precious flour with deadly stone grit. If they are too far apart, the golden grain simply falls through, uncrushed. To control this floating weight, the miller turns a fine threaded iron screw, lifting or lowering the massive top stone by fractions of a single millimetre. Adjusting the enormous, crushing weight with the lightness of a falling feather, and in the most ingenious advanced mills, this delicate adjustment happens completely automatically. A beautiful device called a centrifugal governor spins with the fluctuating speed of the wind. As the wind blows harder, 2 heavy iron balls swing outward on pivoting brass arms, mechanically linked to the stone, lifting it slightly to handle the sudden heavy rush of grain. A perfect self-regulating dance of heavy iron and spinning stone. Feel the perfect, precise balance of this heavy machinery, perfectly suspended, perfectly supported in the dark. And as you feel this absolute balance, your own body finds its perfect resting equilibrium, letting go of all held tension, sinking deeper into the soft, warm comfort of your space. The smooth, fine flour dust settles gently onto the warm, worn floorboards, a soft white snow that reminds us of the immense unseen friction constantly at work between the stones. This relentless friction eventually wears down even the hardest, most unyielding rock, and so the miller must regularly perform an ancient, quiet, meditative ritual known as dressing the stones. When the windmill is completely quiet, its sails securely locked in their resting cross. The heavy wooden casing around the stones is carefully lifted away. The miller kneels beside the massive grey canvas of the stone on heavily padded leather cushions. In his hand, he holds a special hardened steel hammer called a mill bill. With incredible, exhausted patience and a steady, rhythmic hand, he strikes the hard French burr stone. Tink, 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 painstakingly recarving the intricate curving grooves, the furrows that shear the grain. It is a solitary task that takes hours, sometimes days, kneeling in the quiet, dim light of the stone floor. The sharp steel biting into the ancient porous quartz creates tiny fleeting flashes of light in the cool shadows. A slow, deliberate act of restoration, preparing the sleeping heavy giant to once again receive the invisible power of the sky. The sharp, rhythmic tapping of the steel hammer echoes backward through the deep, winding corridors of time, echoing off the high, snowy peaks of distant ancient eastern mountains. Before the sweeping vertical arms of the classic European mills dominated the rolling landscape, there was an elegant older geometry, the vertical axis Painemone mill. Imagine looking down from the quiet sky at a massive spinning wooden carousel. Instead of a horizontal shaft pointing out toward the horizon like a pointing finger, a vertical shaft points straight up to the heavens. Attached to this central spine are broad, flat sails, sometimes made of woven river reeds or tightly stretched animal hides, moving in a continuous, hypnotic, horizontal circle over the dusty ground. It is a design of profound, elegant simplicity. It does not need a heavy wooden cap or a greased iron track, or a fantastic wooden tail fan to constantly turn its face into the wind. Because it spins on a vertical axis, it catches the breeze from absolutely any direction, passively accepting whatever current the atmosphere decides to offer, spinning tirelessly whether the wind blows from the warm, fragrant south or the freezing, bitter north, a profound testament to harmony, yielding, and total acceptance. The elegant, simple lines of the ancient East blend slowly, seamlessly into the thick, protective, storm-beaten textures of the harsh northern coastlines. Here, where the weather is wild and unforgiving, a windmill must be an absolute fortress against the elements. The air is thick with the smell of heavy salt, damp earth, and boiling pine tar. To protect the vital, internal wooden skeleton from the rotting damp of the driving rain and the biting coastal frost, the miller becomes a painter of shadows. Thick, heavy iron cauldrons of black pitch and coal tar are heated over open, crackling fires until they liquefy into a dark, glossy bubbling syrup. Using thick bristle brushes on long, heavy poles, this boiling tar is painted over the overlapping wooden weatherboards of the mill's massive exterior. As it cools in the sea breeze, it hardens into an impenetrable, watertight skin. The towering structure turns a deep, beautiful, raven black, a striking, bold silhouette that absorbs the faint, precious warmth of the pale winter sun. When the heavy rain finally falls, the water simply beads up and rolls smoothly away down the tarred overlapping planks, leaving the inside dry, warm, and deeply filled with the comforting scent of cured wood and toasted grain. The passing heavy rainstorm leaves behind a perfectly washed, pristine twilight sky, an endless, domed canopy of deep violet, slowly being mapped with the bright silver pinpricks of ancient burning stars. Beneath this expanding, quiet cosmos, the windmill stands perfectly aligned with the invisible geography of the atmosphere. The ancient millers did not just feel the wind on their faces, they knew its secret names, its shifting moods, and its distant origins. Deeply connected to the beautiful compass-like geometry of the ancient windrows, they intimately knew the biting, icy temperament of the tramontane rushing down from the jagged northern mountains, and the heavy, humid breath of the sirocco carrying the fine red dust of the distant southern deserts. When placing a new windmill upon a hill, they did not just build blindly. They spent months observing the bending grass, the leaning trees, the subtle shifts in morning temperature. They aligned the structure with absolute precision to catch the dominant prevailing breaths of the planet. They built their wooden giants at the exact, perfect intersections of these invisible atmospheric highways, ensuring that as long as the earth slowly turned and the sun heated the air, the great sails would forever find the wind. And as the gentle, cooling breath of the planet sweeps softly over the sleeping land, your own breathing becomes just as deep, just as rhythmic, just as perfectly calm. You're perfectly aligned with the quiet, resting energy of the night. drifting effortlessly on the invisible, gentle currents of deep restorative sleep. The quiet, resting energy of the night sinks deeply into the earth, moving softly from the starry canopy above down to the heavy, rooted foundations of the great towers. The traditional wooden smock mill, a masterpiece of shipwright timber, does not simply rest upon the damp soil. Instead, it is anchored upon a beautiful octagonal ring of fired clay, a sturdy, unyielding skirt of dark red brick. This heavy masonry base lifts the vulnerable wooden skeleton high above the morning dew, the creeping fog, and the deep winter snows. As the pale moonlight sweeps across the octagonal facets of this brick foundation, it casts long, sharp shadows, highlighting the rough-baked texture of the ancient clay and the soft green moss clinging to the northern-facing walls. This solid, unyielding footing ensures that the soaring wooden tower above can sway, flex, and breathe with the passing heavy gales without ever losing its firm grip on the world. Perfectly grounded. Perfectly secure against the shifting tides of the atmosphere. The texture of this solid clay base leads our mind's eye upward, climbing the narrow interior wooden ladders to the very apex of the structure, where we discover a subtle, brilliant tilt in the architecture. The massive, heavy windshaft, the central wooden axle that bravely holds the great sails out in the storm, does not lie perfectly flat across the cap. Instead, it is angled slightly upward, pointing its heavy, iron-bound nose to the sky at a delicate pitch of 5 to 15 degrees. This beautiful, upward gaze serves a dual purpose in the quiet, immense geometry of the mill. First, it ensures the plunging, massive sails never strike the outward flaring belly of the wooden tower as they sweep past. And second, it deliberately channels the immense pushing weight of the wind backward, driving the heavy axle deeply and securely into its greased stone bearing at the rear of the cap. It is a posture of perfect, elegant resistance. Leaning gently into the terrifying force of the storm, turning a violent push into a stable, grinding rotation, the gentle upward tilt of the heavy shaft carries our gaze back out into the shifting silver moonlight, where the canvas sails themselves have evolved into something intricate, mechanical, and almost alive. Moving beyond simple cloth and rope, the 19th century brought the mesmerizing mechanical beauty of the patent sail. Imagine a heavy wooden framework filled not with coarse, heavy canvas, but with rows of delicate, overlapping wooden shutters, like a colossal set of Venetian blinds catching the wind. In the centre of the spinning, sweeping cross is a beautiful, complex mechanism called the spider. It is a delicate iron cross extending thin, rigid metal arms outward to the banks of wooden shutters. Without the miller ever having to step outside into the bitter cold, a heavy weight hanging deep inside the mill automatically adjusts the spider's delicate tension. When a sudden, violent gust of wind strikes, the shutters instantly yield, blowing wide open to let the dangerous howling air pass harmlessly through the open gaps. As the gust fades, the heavy weight gently, smoothly pulls the shutters closed again, creating a massive, breathing lung of wood and iron that inhales the gentle breeze and exhales the violent storm, perfectly, silently self-regulating. And as you picture this gentle opening and closing, this perfect automatic rhythm of yielding and catching, your own breath mirrors the peaceful cadence, inhaling softly, exhaling completely, releasing all tension into the quiet night. The soft, rhythmic breathing of the wooden shutters exhales a breeze that carries the deep, resinous scent of fresh-cut pine, pulling us from the dusty, golden world of grinding grain into a misty landscape of raw timber and rushing water. Not all windmills were built to feed the body. Some were built to shape the physical world. In the waterlogged, forested regions of the north, the wind-powered sawmill rises from the foggy riverbanks. A skeletal, open-sided structure housing a terrifying, beautiful array of long, jagged steel blades. The immense turning power of the wind is not used to spin heavy circular stones here, but is converted into a violent, rhythmic, vertical plunging motion. The turning windshaft pulls a massive heavy wooden frame up and down, dragging multiple steel saw blades through massive floating logs of oak and elm that have been guided down the river. The sound is a rhythmic, hypnotic shh-shock, 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 as the rough, raw, bark-covered trunks of the ancient forest are sliced into perfect, smooth, golden planks, a brilliant, loud alchemy of wind and steel, turning raw nature into warm, quiet shelter. Echoing this deep, rhythmic cutting is the heavy, slow turning of the internal gears that make it all possible. Massive wooden gears that must be constantly, lovingly cared for, to keep this immense wooden machinery from destroying itself through sheer, burning friction. The miller relies on a rich, heavy ointment born of the earth. Huge, stained wooden vats of rendered animal fat, thick yellow tallow, and sometimes dark, slippery beeswax sit quietly in the shadows of the gear room. With a wide, coarse bristle brush, the miller thickly coats the massive interlocking wooden cogs in this heavy grease. As the massive brake wheel turns against the wallower, the wood absorbs the fat, creating a slick, blackened surface that glides with a silent, eerie smoothness. The air in the high cap of the mill becomes saturated with the smell of this melting tallow. A thick, heavy, almost sweet scent of animal wax, old wood, and trapped frictional heat. A comforting, warm, olfactory blanket that speaks of meticulous care, protection, and the smooth, frictionless passage of time. Rising above the heavy, warm scent of wax and old timber, we float up like a feather into the absolute highest, most isolated reaches of the windmill's interior, a space known simply as the dust floor. Just beneath the curving, boat-shaped roof of the cap, this small circular room exists in near total, profound darkness. It is an empty chamber, completely devoid of heavy machinery, turning gears or grinding stones. Its sole, quiet purpose is to act as an atmospheric trap. As the heavy stones fiercely grind the grain on the floors far below, the finest, most microscopic particles of white flour become suspended in the air, floating upward through the open trapdoors and steep stairwells on the warm rising drafts. When this dust-laden air reaches the cool, dark stillness of the dust floor, it finally gently settles. Over decades, every wooden beam, every curved wall, every rusting iron nail in this small room becomes coated in a thick velvety blanket of pure pale white, a silent soft snowscape hidden high above the world, untouched by the howling wind, perfectly preserving the quiet history of 1,000,000 golden harvests. And as the soft, white dust settles into total, absolute stillness, your own wandering thoughts settle gently down, drifting away into the quiet, dark corners of your mind, leaving a smooth, calm surface of deep, undisturbed peace. The profound stillness of this high white room melts softly away, flowing down through a narrow hollow channel into the vibrant, wet green heart of a flooded meadow. Here, a strange and beautiful hybrid structure stands against the sweeping silver clouds, the hollow post mill or whip molen. It takes the ancient balancing magic of the original suspended wooden post mill, but pierces its very centre with a brilliant, daring innovation. The colossal upright wooden post that supports the entire rotating upper house is not completely solid. It has been meticulously hollowed out by hand. Down through the very core of this central upright pillar runs a long vertical driving shaft of solid forged iron or impossibly dense oak. This hidden spine allows the sweeping sails high above to capture the raging winds, while sending their immense turning power straight down, spinning through the empty heart of the post into the stationary base below, where it turns a massive churning wooden water wheel. It is a stunning, beautiful paradox of mechanical engineering. A spinning, turning house that holds a perfectly still hollow centre, funneling the raw, invisible power of the sky directly into the dark, cold, heavy waters of the earth. Following the churning, splashing water downward, the taste of the air shifts dramatically. losing the soft, earthy sweetness of fresh water and taking on the sharp, crystalline tang of raw salt. In the sun-drenched coastal salt pans of the Mediterranean and the Caribbean, a smaller, tireless breed of windmill works under a blistering, endless sky. Their canvas sails are bleached to a stark bone white by the intense ultraviolet light of the sun. They do not grind heavy grain, nor do they drain the flooded green pastures. Instead, they operate simple rhythmic wooden pumps that draw thick, heavy brine, seawater concentrated by the blazing sun, from one shallow evaporation pond to the next. As the water flows slowly through the shallow rectangular basins, the hot sun bakes the moisture away, leaving behind blindingly bright, perfect geometric fields of pure white sea salt. The gentle, mechanical clatter of the salt mill is the only sound in this silent, shimmering, heat-distorted landscape, slowly turning the fluid ocean into hard, sparkling diamonds of salt, using nothing but the steady, eternal whispering pressure of the coastal trade winds. The brilliant, flashing reflection of the salt flat softens, returning us to the cool, dark, complex heart of the European timber machines. We look closer at the magnificent brake wheel, the largest, most critical gear in the entire towering structure, and discover it is not carved from a single type of wood, but is a careful mosaic of different, highly specialized trees. The massive outer rim of the wheel, which must withstand the crushing, burning grip of the heavy iron brake band, is fashioned from heavy, seasoned oak or resilient elm, dense woods that fiercely refuse to splinter under immense screaming friction. But the protruding teeth, the carefully carved cogs that must constantly mesh with the smaller gears, are carved from dense fruit-bearing woods like applewood or hornbeam. These fruitwoods are incredibly hard, yet possess a smooth, natural grain that polishes itself to a glass-like finish as it constantly grinds against other wood. It is a beautiful, deeply thought-out harmony of the forest, combining the unyielding, rigid strength of the oak with the slick, durable grace of the apple tree, all spinning together in perfect structural unity. The deep, quiet unity of the forest timbers wraps warmly around us, transforming the industrial machine into a space of profound human comfort. In the massive, towering smock mills of the Dutch countryside, the windmill was not just a factory of flour or a pumping station. It was a sanctuary, a home. The miller and his entire family lived beautifully within the sloping octagonal walls of the wooden tower. Because the walls leaned inward as they rose to meet the cap, the interior architecture was wonderfully, strangely curved. To maximize the tight space, cozy sleeping alcoves, called box beds, were built directly into the thick timbered walls. Imagine climbing into a small enclosed wooden cabinet tucked safely away behind intricately carved wooden doors. Inside, a soft, deep mattress of down or dried straw rests against the curved, sloping outer wall of the mill. As you lie there in the dark, the massive, heavy sweeps pass just inches from your head on the outside. A rhythmic, powerful whoosh, whoosh, whoosh that vibrates softly through the heavy timber. An incredibly secure, womb-like cradle, rocked gently to sleep by the very forces of nature turning above. And as you feel the heavy, protective timber wrapping securely around you, the rhythmic sweep of the wind outside becomes a soothing, ancient lullaby, lulling you deeper and deeper into a place of absolute safety and profound, unbroken rest. The rhythmic, incredibly powerful whoosh of the sweeping sails passing just outside that cozy hidden wooden bed, slowly, gently fades into the deep, resonant internal heartbeat of the tower itself. The entire interior of a classic wooden smock mill is not just a building designed for labour, it is the hollow, beautifully resonating chamber of a colossal, ancient string instrument. As the massive wooden gears engage and turn, and the heavy windshaft grinds smoothly against the tallow-greased wooden blocks, the deep vibrations travel downward, flowing through the colossal upright corner posts and the heavy angular cross-bracing. The seasoned wood literally sings. It is a complex, continuous symphony of low-frequency hums, gentle, rhythmic creaks, and deep, percussive thumps that only centuries-old timber can produce. The master miller does not even need to open his eyes in the dark to know the exact speed of the wind or the perfect health of his great machine. He simply feels the deep vibration travelling through the thick soles of his boots, listening to the complex acoustic language of the living wood as it flexes, breathes, and hums in perfect harmonious alignment with the invisible currents of the sky. The visual, melancholic beauty of this internal music spills outward into the cool, damp air, catching the careful, observant eye of the great master painters of the 17th century. In the dramatic, golden, shifting light of the Dutch Golden Age, the windmill was elevated from a simple rural machine of harvest to a profound, towering symbol of human resilience and divine grace. Imagine a vast, sweeping canvas painted by Jacob van Ruysdael, dominated entirely by a bruised, towering sky filled with heavy, rolling purple cumulonimbus clouds. The afternoon light is theatrical and fleeting, piercing through the dark, stormy grey masses to cast a brilliant heavenly spotlight perfectly upon the towering silhouette of a brick and timber mill standing quietly at the water's edge. The artist painstakingly captures every rough, tactile texture of the tarred weatherboard, the slack, heavy canvas of the resting sails, and the perfect glassy reflection mirroring the giant in the dark, slow-moving river below. It is a breathless moment frozen perfectly in thick oil paint. Capturing the fleeting, monumental majesty of the heavy shadowed earth, meeting the raw, turbulent, unpredictable power of the heavens. Beneath these vast, dramatic, painted skies, suspended halfway up the soaring, sloping sides of the very tallest towers, hangs a delicate wraparound wooden balcony, known softly as the gallery or the stage. Because some of these magnificent giants grew so breathtakingly tall that their massive sweeps no longer reached the soft earth, the miller needed a safe platform high up in the sky. This narrow, elevated wooden walkway is surrounded by a simple, white-painted wooden railing. Standing out here on the thick oak planks, suspended 50 or 60 feet above the soft green patchwork of the fields, you are entirely surrounded by the rushing open wind. To unfurl the heavy canvas, or to manually turn the massive cap into the oncoming breeze, the miller walks the gentle circle of this high stage. Stepping carefully along the wooden boards as the massive heavy lattice arms plunge down from the grey clouds, passing terrifyingly close to the fragile railing before sweeping violently back up into the sky. It is a place of breathtaking, wind-swept solitude. A private, elevated walkway caught perfectly between the grounded, heavy reality of the soil and the rushing, invisible rivers of the upper atmosphere. And as you visualize standing on this high, quiet platform, feeling the gentle, steadying presence of the cool wooden rail beneath your resting hands, your own heart rate settles into a slow, peaceful, hypnotic rhythm. You are completely safe. You are suspended beautifully above the worries of the waking world, breathing in the cool, clean, rushing air, simply letting go. Stepping off the high, breezy gallery and drifting softly back into the warm, deeply shadowed interior of the cap, we discover a quiet, brilliant revolution in the hidden mechanics of motion. For long centuries of history, the entire crushing, multi-ton weight of the turning roof rested directly on greased wooden blocks, groaning in heavy, agonizing protest every time the wind shifted. But as the era of iron softly dawned, a beautiful hidden circle of strength was introduced, the live curb. Imagine a massive, perfect ring of heavy cast iron rollers, smooth, incredibly heavy metal wheels trapped safely within a circular iron track, perfectly encircling the very top edge of the wooden tower. The entire crushing weight of the wooden cap and the massive plunging sails now rest completely upon these rolling iron spheres. When the wind softly shifts and the fantail begins to spin, the heavy roof no longer drags heavily against the wood. it glides. The iron rollers turn smoothly, silently in their greased track, carrying the colossal burden with the effortless, floating grace of a passing cloud. It is the absolute perfection of frictionless movement, a massive, heavy burden rendered completely, beautifully weightless. This smooth, effortless, gliding motion carries us far away from the golden, dusty scent of harvested wheat, drifting into a completely different landscape of pure, blinding, pristine white. The powerful, turning force of the windmill was not only used to feed the physical body, but to help create objects of delicate, fragile beauty. In the rolling, green, chalky hills where ancient, forgotten seabeds once lay, the chalk mills rise. Instead of soft, golden grain, these incredibly heavy, heavily reinforced machines are built to crush solid chunks of raw, white limestone and ancient flint. The massive, ton-heavy edge-runner stones, huge vertical wheels of solid, unyielding granite, roll constantly in a circular iron trough, crushing the hard white rocks into an impossibly fine, microscopic silken powder. The still air inside these specialized mills is completely opaque with this heavy white mist. This pure, brilliant powder is then carefully gathered and transported to the intense glowing heat of the potter's kilns, where it is transformed into the smooth, translucent, fragile perfection of fine bone china and delicate porcelain, turning the raw, hard, ancient bones of the earth into delicate teacups that hold the gentle warmth of the morning. The fine, brilliant white powder of the crushed chalk dissolves softly, melting into a mist of pure, clean river water, leading us to the heavy, rhythmic, soaking, wet environment of the wind-powered paper mills. Here, the raw, roaring power of the sky is miraculously harnessed to preserve the fragile written memory of humanity. Instead of turning heavy, circular stones, the massive wooden gears of the paper mill lift incredibly heavy, iron-shod wooden beams, dropping them in a constant, deafening rhythmic thud, thud, thud. These are the massive trip hammers. Beneath them, in deep, cool stone vats of clear river water, torn scraps of old cotton and linen rags are battered and pounded relentlessly until they dissolve completely into a cloudy, suspended, fibrous pulp. The master paper maker gently, patiently dips a delicate woven wire mesh frame into this cloudy water, lifting it with absolute level precision. As the excess water drains away through the mesh, a perfect interwoven layer of soft cotton fibres remains behind. It is pressed, dried, and smoothed, a miraculous alchemy transforming discarded, worn-out cloth into a flawless, empty sheet of crisp, white paper, a perfect blank canvas waiting quietly to capture a poem, a love letter, or a fleeting dream. And as that smooth, unblemished sheet of paper forms in the cool water, so too does your mind smooth out every wrinkle, every crease, every lingering, restless thought of the day washes completely away, leaving only a blank, peaceful, beautiful stillness. The rhythmic, distant thud of the wooden hammers is just a slow, resting heartbeat, deepening your trance, drawing you further down. Leaving the damp, fragrant, fibrous vats of the paper mills, we drift back out into the open, expansive evening air, where the tall, solitary silhouettes of the windmills serve profound, secondary purpose for those wandering the darkened earth. Before the modern age of illuminated maps and glowing artificial screens, the flat, endless landscapes of the lowlands and the vast fens could be terrifyingly disorienting in the fading light. But the windmills stood as towering, immovable, comforting guardians, the ancient unlit lighthouses of the grassy sea. Navigators, weary travellers, and wandering merchants used the distinct, unique profiles of specific windmills to safely find their way home. One mill on the horizon might have an unusually flared, wide smock base. Another might possess a distinctively pointed pitch-black cap. By carefully memorizing this towering silent alphabet of wood and canvas across the flat horizon, a traveller could perfectly, accurately pinpoint their location. They were the reassuring, deeply familiar friends standing tall against the twilight, silent, patient guides pointing the exact way to a warm hearth and a safe, soft bed at the very end of a long, exhausting journey. The dark, comforting silhouettes standing against the cool, damp northern twilight slowly begin to burn, transforming softly into the fiery, rust-coloured, brilliant sunsets of the deep, arid south. We arrive on the sun-baked, ancient limestone ridges of Consuegra, Spain, entering the sweeping, legendary golden landscape of La Mancha. Here, a completely different, ancient tribe of giants stands bravely against the blindingly bright, cloudless sky. They do not have the sloping, intricately crafted wooden smock sides of their damp northern cousins. Instead, they are perfect, stark, heavy cylinders of solid, rough-hewn stone, painted a brilliant, blazing white that brilliantly reflects the intense, baking heat of the Spanish sun. Their roofs are small, dark, conical caps of rough, weathered wood. They stand perfectly spaced in a long, dramatic, unbroken line along the crest of the barren, windswept hill, overlooking an endless, flat, shimmering ocean of red earth, silver-green olive groves, and ancient vineyards. These are the very same romantic, enduring giants that inspired the legendary dreaming tales of Don Quixote, standing proud and utterly motionless in the sweltering heat, catching the dry, dusty thermals that rise from the baked plains, grinding the hard, golden wheat of the Mediterranean under a sky of absolute, limitless azure. From the solid, unyielding, sun-baked ancient stone of the Spanish ridges, our perspective narrows, delving deeply, quietly into the hollow, cold iron core of the brilliant modernizations that eventually followed. As the great sweeping sails evolved to open and close their wooden shutters automatically with the shifting wind, a brilliant hidden connection had to be forged right through the very spinning center of the machine. This is the striking rod. Imagine the massive, incredibly heavy main windshaft, the central turning axle that bravely holds the tons of spinning sail out in the open sky. In the most advanced, brilliant mills, this colossal iron shaft was forged completely hollow. Down through the very center of this dark, continuously spinning tunnel runs a single, slender, stationary rod of solid steel. This thin rod physically connects the complex, moving, fluttering shutters on the massive sails outside, all the way through the spinning axle, to the heavy, governing weights hanging peacefully inside the quiet, protected cap. It is a stunning, beautiful piece of internal anatomy, allowing the stationary, resting, calm weights inside the room to perfectly, instantly control the wild, spinning, violent motion of the sails outside. A masterstroke of invisible, calming control hidden deep within the dark iron. This absolute, beautiful central control is a careful, meticulous preparation for the inevitable. Terrifying moments when the sky darkens completely, the barometric pressure violently plunges, and the true destructive fury of nature awakens. When the black storm clouds roll in from the ocean, and the winds shift from a gentle working breeze to a howling, screaming hurricane, the windmill must go into a deep, protected sleep just to survive. The miller bravely climbs down to the wet, grassy earth and turns the massive sails into the resting cross. But in a true, violent storm, the heavy wooden brake alone is not nearly enough to hold back the screaming, tearing wind. The miller takes heavy, forged iron chains, incredibly thick, cold links of unyielding black metal, and wraps them tightly, securely around the lower tips of the massive wooden sweeps, anchoring them directly to deeply driven heavy wooden pegs buried in the solid earth. The towering giant is chained completely down. As the wind howls and screams around the shivering tower, the canvas is tightly rolled, The ancient wood groans in the dark, but the massive arms cannot turn. It is the ultimate, profound act of securing the giant for a night of deep, undisturbed rest, surviving the chaos and the dark storm by simply refusing to move. And as the heavy, cold iron chains gently, securely lock the great machine against the raging storm outside, you too are deeply anchored, perfectly safe, perfectly grounded in the profound warmth of your bed. The winds of the waking world may howl and push just outside your walls, but in here there is only absolute stillness, deep, undisturbed peace, and the heavy, comforting pull of sleep. The heavy, comforting pull of sleep settles deeply into the saturated earth, and as the morning sun finally breaks through the departing storm clouds, it warms the damp soil, releasing a rich, earthy fragrance into the quiet air. We follow this warm, heavy scent into the dark, timbered belly of the oil mill, or oleomelin. Here the wind is not asked to softly shear golden wheat, but to deliver a massive, crushing, percussive force. In the dim, amber-tinted light, massive edge-runner stones, vertical discs of solid granite weighing thousands of pounds, roll relentlessly in a circular wooden trough, crushing tiny, glossy brown flax seeds into a thick, coarse meal. But the true magic lies in the stampers. The great wooden windshaft high above lifts enormous, heavy oak beams and drops them with a rhythmic, earth-shaking thud, 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 driving massive wooden wedges deep into the presses. Under this immense, terrifying pressure, the crushed seeds finally yield their hidden treasure. A thick, viscous, golden liquid, pure raw linseed oil begins to weep and flow from the wooden presses, catching the stray, dusty beams of sunlight. A beautiful, slow, heavy nectar, born of raw wind and crushing weight. The golden, glowing warmth of the dripping oil seeps outward, illuminating the very face of the towering wooden machine. Just below the massive iron windshaft extending down over the slanted wooden weatherboards like a protective shield, is a piece of art completely unique to the old Dutch masters, the bard or the beard of the mill. This is not a piece of functional machinery, but a magnificent hand-carved wooden plaque of soaring pride and identity. Painted in brilliant, rich shades of emerald green, deep crimson, and bright, flashing gold leaf, the beard proudly displays the name of the mill, the cat, the seeker, the hero, surrounded by intricately carved, swirling vines, roaring lions, or gentle resting angels. As the morning sun strikes the face of the mill, this vivid burst of colour stands out brilliantly against the dark, tarred wood, a beautiful, quiet declaration of the human soul permanently attached to the relentless turning gears of industry, giving the faceless wooden giant a true, vibrant and enduring name. The vivid, flashing colours of the painted wood begin to swirl and bleed in our mind's eye, transforming smoothly into the vibrant, aromatic mountains of crushed spices found in the legendary mills of the Zantse Schans. Stepping inside a wind-powered spice mill is like walking into a thick, intoxicating cloud of raw equatorial heat. The air itself is tinted, coloured with the fine, suspended dust of crushed yellow mustard seeds, dark, pungent cloves, and the rich, rusty red of ground cinnamon. The heavy millstones here are dressed differently, their surfaces carved with special furrows to perfectly shear the tough, fibrous bark and the hard, oily seeds. As the great sails sweep outside in the cold, damp European air, the interior is a tropical dream, the immense friction of the stones releasing essential oils that coat the wooden beams and the miller's clothes. Every breath you take inside this softly lit, dusty room is a journey across oceans, a rich, heavy, warming inhalation of the distant Spice Islands, brought all the way to the freezing north by the quiet power of the wind. And as you inhale that imagined warming scent, a deep, soothing comfort spreads slowly through your chest. Your breathing naturally slows, your muscles loosen, sinking deeper into the soft, secure darkness of your resting mind. The soft, dusty warmth of the spiced air leads us to the most delicate, sensitive instrument in the entire towering structure. An instrument made not of oak or iron, but of living flesh and bone. It is the legendary miller's thumb. For decades, the master miller stands beside the wooden chutes, catching the freshly ground meal as it falls from the heavy stones. He instinctively, constantly rubs the fine, warm powder between his thumb and forefinger. This quiet, repetitive motion, performed millions of times over a lifetime, develops an incredibly profound, microscopic sensitivity in his skin. He can feel if the massive stones weighing over a ton are even a fraction of a millimetre too close or too far apart, simply by the microscopic texture of the flour. Over the years, the constant, gentle pressure permanently reshapes his hand, flattening the tip of his thumb into a smooth, broad spade. It is a quiet, beautiful badge of honour, a physical transformation where the human body softly, perfectly adapts to the eternal rhythm of the spinning stones. The soft, powdery touch of the flour between the fingertips melts away, dissolving into the sticky, sweet, blistering heat of the deep tropics. We travel far across the Atlantic Ocean, leaving the green pastures behind to land on the brilliant coral-white shores of Barbados and Antigua. Here, the ruins of ancient sugar mills dot the lush, vibrant jungle landscape. Built from rough-hewn blocks of fossilized coral and pale limestone, these towers lack the tall, delicate wooden smocks of the north. In their prime, they stood against the blinding turquoise sky, catching the relentless, predictable flow of the warm trade winds. Their massive, turning wooden arms drove an entirely different set of gears, turning 3 massive vertical iron rollers. The workers fed incredibly thick, fibrous stalks of green sugarcane directly into these crushing iron jaws. The mill moaned and squealed under the immense pressure, squeezing out rivers of sweet, pale green cane juice, a beautiful, powerful collision of the ocean's invisible breath and the sweet, heavy blood of the tropical earth. The continuous flowing river of sweet green juice carries our minds gracefully back to the flow of water itself, returning to the deep, waterlogged battlegrounds of the Dutch polders. We look closely at the hidden mechanics that pull the heavy ocean away from the land. While many drainage mills used massive, splashing wooden paddle wheels, the most advanced, brilliant water lifters utilized a masterpiece of ancient Greek mathematics, the Archimedes screw. Encased within a massive, steeply angled wooden cylinder is a colossal, spiraling wooden drill. As the giant sails turn high above, this heavy wooden helix slowly rotates in the dark, freezing water of the lower canal. It does not splash or thrash violently. Instead, it elegantly, silently traps pockets of water in the deep curves of its spiral, smoothly pulling the heavy liquid up the incline. Rotating continuously, a hypnotic, twisting, endless wooden staircase that elevates the cold water up into the light and deposits it safely over the dikes, a miracle of continuous fluid motion. Following that smooth, continuous upward spiral, you feel a gentle lifting of all your own heavy burdens, twisting slowly, gracefully away into the ether, leaving you incredibly light, incredibly calm, drifting completely free in the quiet, comforting dark. The lifted water flows out onto the green grass, and then slowly, softly evaporates, drawing us into the vast, silent, burning red heart of the Australian outback. Here, the romantic canvas sails and the heavy oak gears are entirely absent. In this beautiful, desolate, boundless landscape of red dust and pale spinifex grass, the Southern Cross wind pump stands as a solitary, vital beacon of life. It is a tall, skeletal tower of silver galvanized steel, topped with a large, multi-bladed metal fan that catches the fierce, dry thermals of the desert. Below it, the earth is parched and cracked, but hundreds of feet down, the great artesian basin holds ancient, cool water. The spinning metal wheel drives a long, thin sucker rod deep into the dark stone, pulling that precious, freezing liquid up to the surface. The only sound for hundreds of miles is the lonely, rhythmic, metallic squeak of the wheel, and the beautiful, life-giving splash of cold water hitting the hot, dusty iron of a sheep trough. A tiny oasis of survival powered completely by the relentless, burning breath of the desert. The dry, brittle texture of the desert grass transports us instantly back to the cool, misty marshlands of Europe, where another type of grass provides the ultimate waterproof protection for the wooden giants. We look up at the beautifully curved, boat-shaped roof of the mill's cap, and see that it is not covered in wood or tar, but in a thick, beautifully insulating blanket of golden brown thatch. Master thatchers spend weeks suspended high in the air, weaving thousands of bundles of dry, hollow Norfolk reeds over the wooden framework. Using heavy wooden mallets, they pound the coarse reeds upward, creating a perfectly smooth, sloping surface that is incredibly dense. This woven helmet of dried marsh grass is a brilliant natural shield. When the freezing winter rains lash against the top of the tower, the water simply follows the exact unbroken line of the downward sloping reeds, sliding harmlessly off the edges without ever penetrating the dry, warm wooden sanctuary below. The comforting smell of old, dried river grass forever hovering over the spinning iron gears. Beneath that thick, protective helmet of woven reeds lies the invisible, mathematical heartbeat of the entire structure. The beautiful, terrifying alchemy of the gear ratio. Standing outside in the damp grass, you watch the massive, heavy lattice sails carving their huge, elegant circles in the sky. They seem to move with a slow, heavy, majestic grace, turning perhaps 10 or 15 times in a single minute. But inside the dark, dusty tower, that slow, outward majesty is miraculously transformed into a blur of terrifying speed. The massive wooden brake wheel, holding over 100 meticulously carved wooden cogs, meshes with the tiny wallower gear. One single, slow rotation of the giant sails outside forces the heavy millstones deep below to spin wildly, rotating 5, 6, or even 7 times for every single sweep of the outer arms. It is a hidden, mechanical accelerator, multiplying the quiet, slow breath of the sky into a violent, high-speed, crushing friction in the dark. An invisible, perfect geometry that balances slow grace with absolute devastating power. And as you feel that perfect, balanced rhythm, the slow grace of the outside, the quiet power of the inside, your own heartbeat aligns perfectly with this deep mathematical piece, steady, strong, and deeply, wonderfully relaxed. The perfect, quiet rhythm of the internal gears leads us to the very back of the cap, where a simple, incredibly thick hemp rope hangs down from the high wooden rafters. This is the endless chain of the manual winding gear. Before the automatic, self-turning fantail was invented, some towering mills were simply too massive to turn from the ground with a wooden tail pole. Instead, the miller stood on the high, breezy wooden gallery, grasping a rough, heavy loop of rope that hung from a large wooden wheel at the back of the cap. By pulling rhythmically, hand over hand in a slow, hypnotic, exhausting motion, he engaged a series of small, incredibly powerful iron gears that slowly, agonizingly dragged the massive multi-ton roof around its greased iron track. Creak, pull, creak, pull. The rough texture of the hemp against the palms, the deep groaning complaint of the iron rollers, and the slow, sweeping change of the shadows across the high balcony. It is a beautiful, tactile memory of human labour intimately, quietly wrestling with the immense scale of the atmosphere. The slow, heavy pulling of the hemp rope fades into the background of time, becoming a distant echo in the vast, silent corridors of history, where the physical labour of man meets the delicate, shifting whims of the sky. As the miller releases the rough fibre, the friction of the rope leaves a fading warmth in his palms, a heat that leads our senses toward the most dangerous, mesmerizing phenomenon in the life of a wooden giant: fire in the mill. In the heart of a powerful gale, when the wind screams with an almost supernatural intensity, the massive brake wheel can become a ring of pure, terrifying light. If the wooden brake blocks are clamped too tightly against the spinning wheel to stop the runaway sails, the sheer, unimaginable friction generates a heat so intense it bypasses smoke and goes straight to flame. In the dark of a storm-lashed night, the high cap of the mill can suddenly glow with a fierce internal sun. The smell of scorching applewood and boiling tallow filling the air as the very machinery that creates life's bread begins to consume itself in a brilliant, tragic furnace of kinetic energy. A reminder of the raw, untamable power that lives within the invisible breath of the world. The fading glow of that internal fire cools softly, turning into the pale, silvery light of a winter moon reflecting off a frozen, desolate marsh. While the great mills of the plains were built for power, there existed a smaller, humbler family of wind catchers known as the hollow post wind pumps of the fens. These are the quiet, spindly ghosts of the wetlands. Tiny, box-like wooden structures perched atop a slender, hollowed tree trunk. They do not grind or crush. They perform a single, tireless, lonely task in the freezing dark. Deep inside the hollow post, a simple wooden rod moves up and down in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, driving a small leather bucket pump in the peat-stained water below. They stand in the middle of flooded fields where no man can walk, their small sails turning with a frantic, chattering energy in the northern gusts. They are the modest, essential ancestors of our modern technology, proving that even the smallest breath of wind can be harnessed to lift 1,000 tons of water, one slow, rhythmic heartbeat at a time. Echoing this humble, persistent rhythm is the magnificent geometric complexity found in the sail arm itself. If you were to look closely at the skeletal wooden framework of a resting sail, you would see it is not a flat board, but a masterpiece of aerodynamic sculpture. Every single arm is built with a subtle, elegant twist, a weathering that mimics the curve of an airplane wing or a bird's primary feather. The wooden laths at the tip of the sail are set at a different angle than those near the central axle. This beautiful, spiralling geometry ensures that the wind strikes the sail with equal force across its entire 60-foot length. Without this twist, the wind would simply push the mill over. With it, the wind is coaxed into a graceful circular dance. As you watch the sails turn, you are seeing 1,000 years of trial and error carved into a single piece of oak, a shape that understands the air so perfectly it can turn a destructive blast into a gentle, productive hum. And as this perfect, spiraling shape captures the air, your own thoughts begin to spiral gently inward, moving away from the edges of the room, turning toward the soft, warm center of your own being. You are safe. You are balanced. You are drifting. The graceful, carved twist of the wooden sail dissolves into the fluid, shifting shadows of the deep forest, where the very first post mills were born from the tallest, straightest oaks in the kingdom. In those ancient days, before the invention of stone towers, the entire windmill was built around a single massive king post, a tree trunk so large and dense it required 20 teams of oxen to haul it from the woods. This post was not buried in the ground where it would rot, but was held upright by a colossal cross-shaped wooden foundation called cross trees. These heavy timbers sat on top of stone piers, hidden beneath a protective wooden skirt. When you stand inside the bottom of an ancient post mill, you are standing in the shadow of a forest giant that has been standing upright for 300 years, even though it is no longer rooted in the earth. The air here is still and cool, smelling of ancient sap and dry rot, a silent cathedral of timber that carries the weight of a 50-ton house on a single, polished point of balance. While the heavy oak post remains motionless in the dark, the light above it brightens, revealing the vibrant, busy world of the bolting floor. Once the grain has been crushed by the great stones, it is not yet the fine, white flour we know. It falls through a wooden chute into a long, sloping, hexagonal wooden drum covered in the finest, most delicate silk. This is the bolter. As the wind turns the sails outside, it also spins this silk cylinder. The heavy bran stays inside while the finest, softest flour sifts through the silk like a cloud of white summer mist. In the dim light of the mill, the bolting floor is always covered in a layer of this silken dust, making every surface feel as smooth as a polished pearl. The miller moves through this white world like a ghost. His clothes and hair turn silver by the constant, gentle rain of starch. It is a quiet, powdery sanctuary where the rough harvest of the fields is finely refined into the pure, soft essence of life. The silken, powdery whiteness of the flour floor leads our imagination to the stone nut, the smallest, yet most critical gear in the entire mechanical lineage. If the massive brake wheel is the heart of the mill, the stone nut is the spark of its intellect. It is a small, beehive-shaped gear made of the hardest hornbeam wood, and it sits directly atop the iron spindle that turns the heavy millstone. But the brilliance of the stone nut lies in its ability to disappear. By turning a simple wooden handle, the miller can slide the stone nut out of its track, disengaging the stones from the sails. This allows the sails to spin freely in a light breeze without wearing down the precious stones. It is the original clutch, a way to separate the power of nature from the work of man. The sound of the stone nut engaging, a sharp wooden clack, 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 is the signal to the entire village that the wind has returned and the day's work has finally begun. And as that rhythmic clacking fades into a steady, distant thrum, you feel the gears of your own day disengaging. The heavy stones of your responsibilities are lifted. The power is still there, but the work is done. You are free to spin in the quiet, free to simply exist in the dark. The small, hard wooden teeth of the stone nut dissolve into the vast, shimmering heat haze of the Spanish plains, where the windmills of La Mancha served a purpose far beyond the grinding of grain. In the legendary land of Don Quixote, these white, cylindrical stone towers were built on the highest, most desolate ridges, where the wind was strongest, but the water was non-existent. To build them, every drop of water used to mix the mortar had to be carried up the rocky hills in clay jars on the backs of donkeys. Because of this, the walls were built with an incredible tapering thickness, sometimes 4 feet wide at the base, to keep the interior cool in the 100-degree Spanish summer. When you step inside one of these white giants, the temperature instantly drops 20 degrees. The thick, cool stone walls feel like the walls of a cave, shielding you from the relentless golden sun. It is a fortress of cool silence, where the only sound is the distant rhythmic whistling of the dry Castilian wind against the conical thatched roof. This cool, protective silence is echoed in the choke, a subtle aromatic secret known only to those who live within the mill's walls. When a windmill is working at its peak, the air inside becomes incredibly dry and warm from the friction of the stones. This creates a unique atmospheric pressure that draws the scent of the wood, the grain, and the grease into a single intoxicating perfume. This is the breath of the mill. It is a scent that never leaves the timber. Even 100 years after a mill has stopped turning, the wood still exhales this deep, comforting aroma of toasted wheat and old pine. For the miller's children, sleeping in their box beds, this scent was the very smell of safety. To breathe it in was to know that the harvest was good, the tower was strong, and the family was fed. It is a scent that lingers in the back of the throat, a warm, grainy sweetness that tells the story of 1,000 summers captured in a single wooden room. From the invisible scent of the air, we drift toward the visible sweep of the sails against the evening sky, where we find the most poetic of all windmill traditions, the morning position. When a great miller passed away, the entire community would look to the horizon to see the mill's final tribute. The sails were stopped not in a cross, but in a specific tilted angle that indicated the heart of the village was heavy. In some regions, the mill would be turned out of the wind, its face pointed away from the breeze in a gesture of profound, silent refusal to work while the master rested. But the most moving tribute was the passing sail, As the funeral procession moved along the road toward the church, the miller's successor would release the brake, allowing the massive unsailed wooden arms to turn slowly, one last time, in a somber rhythmic bow to the man who had spent his life in their shadow. The heavy creak of the timber was the only eulogy needed, a slow mechanical sigh that echoed across the flat, silent fields. While the morning sails tell of the end of a journey, the sweeps also speak of a beginning, specifically the leaning of the sails into the leading edge. If you look at a windmill from the front, you will notice that the sails almost always turn anti-clockwise. There is no deep scientific reason for this, other than the simple weight of tradition. The very first millwrights in the Middle Ages chose this direction, perhaps because it felt more natural to their right-handed tools, and for 1,000 years the world has followed their lead. Because of this, every piece of internal machinery, every screw, every gear, every stone, is threaded and built to work in that one specific direction. The entire building is a monument to a single ancient choice. As you watch the sails sweep down on the left and rise on the right, you're watching a mechanical tradition that has remained unbroken since the time of the Crusades. A slow, steady, anti-clockwise heartbeat that has timed the lives of 30 generations. The steady, anti-clockwise heartbeat of the ancient sails slows down, moving slower and slower until the motion is almost imperceptible. The massive wooden arms are now just dark, elegant lines against a deep velvet sky. They have finished their work for the night, and so have you. The wind is still there, whispering through the lattice work, but the brake is set, the stones are resting, and the tower is still. You are the miller, retreating into the warm, scented darkness of your box bed. The thick stone walls protect you, the thatch roof shields you, and the memory of the turning sails lulls you into a deep, dreamless and perfect sleep. The deep, dreamless and perfect sleep of the miller's chamber expands, blossoming into a vast, silent landscape where the physical boundaries of the mill begin to blur with the very atmosphere it inhabits. We find ourselves drifting toward the smock itself, not the building, but the spirit of the fabric that once clothed its arms. In the earliest days of sailing through the air, the canvas used for windmill sails was treated with a secret ancestral brew of oak bark and seawater, a process known as tanning. This darkened the cloth to a deep earthy russet or a bruised burnt amber, the colour of a sunset captured in thread. As these heavy tanned sails swept through the twilight, they didn't just catch the wind, they seemed to drink in the remaining light of the day, glowing with a soft inner heat. The texture was stiff and salt-crusted, a rugged skin that whispered and snapped with a heavy metallic resonance, a sound like the distant beating of a giant's heart against the drum of the sky. This heavy, rhythmic beating carries our consciousness deeper into the dark, secret cavities of the tower, down past the spinning gears to the governor's floor, where we encounter the lift tenter. Imagine a set of heavy, polished brass or iron spheres, spinning in a dizzying horizontal circle around a central rod. As the wind picks up and the sails outside begin to race, these heavy balls swing outward by centrifugal force, rising higher and higher. This mechanical sensation of speed is translated instantly through a series of levers to the millstones. It is the mill's own nervous system, a way for the building to feel the velocity of the storm and adjust its internal pressure accordingly. The brass spheres catch the dim lantern light, flashing like small golden suns as they whirl in the shadows, a hypnotic, spinning dance of pure physics that ensures the mill never overreaches, never strains, and always maintains its perfect, serene equilibrium. And as those golden spheres spin in their perfect, predictable circles, you feel the equilibrium of your own body settling, the frantic pace of the day slowing to match the rhythmic, steady orbit of the iron. You are balanced, you are centered, you are deeply at rest. The spinning brass melts into the cool, silent surface of a mill pond, a still, dark mirror reflecting the immense tower mill rising above the reeds. Unlike the wooden smock mills that lean and flex, the tower mill is a monument of absolute unmoving permanence. Built from thousands of hand-pressed bricks or massive blocks of quarried flint, these towers are often 7 or 8 stories tall, their walls tapering toward the sky with the grace of a lighthouse. Because the body of the mill is stone, it is completely silent. The only sound is the wind whistling over the mortar, and the distant, muffled thrumming of the machinery high above in the wooden cap. Standing at the base of a great stone tower, you feel the sheer, crushing weight of the history it holds. It is a cool, damp silence that smells of lime mortar and ancient dust, a heavy architectural embrace that promises to stand for 500 years, unbothered by the fleeting passage of human seasons. Within that heavy stone embrace, the light shifts, becoming the flickering warm glow of a forge. We're drawn to the pole end, the massive iron-bound heart where the sails meet the axle. This is where the 4 great wooden arms, the whips, are wedged into a colossal cross-shaped iron casting at the very front of the mill. To keep these 50-foot timbers from flying out under the immense centrifugal force of a storm, they are secured with shackles and wedges of seasoned oak. A master millwright can tell the health of a mill just by tapping on these wedges with a small hammer. A bright ring means the sails are tight and true, while a dull thud warns of a hidden looseness. The pole end is the fulcrum of the entire world, a single iron point where the wild, horizontal rush of the gale is forced to turn a corner and become the vertical, heavy labour of the stones, a mechanical intersection of chaos and order. This intersection of order and chaos carries us out of the tower and into the mill yard, where the very earth beneath our feet tells a story of hidden, subterranean tunnel caps. In certain coastal regions where the wind was a fickle, swirling beast, millers dug secret brick-lined tunnels that radiated outward from the base of the mill like the spokes of a wheel. These were not for escape, but for the tail pole. By anchoring the heavy wooden pole into different stone sockets hidden within these tunnels, the miller could lock the mill's cap into a precise, mathematically perfect alignment with the prevailing currents. Walking through these cool, dark tunnels, you can still see the scrape marks on the brick where the heavy oak pole has dragged for centuries, a physical map of 1,000 shifting winds, recorded in the very foundation of the earth, a silent diary of the sky's changing moods. And as you trace the marks of the ancient wind, the path of your own journey becomes clear and soft, a gentle, predestined track through the darkness, leading you away from the light, leading you toward the deep, cool tunnels of sleep. The dark, brick-lined tunnels open up into the vast, bright gallery of the French windmills, where the Provençal giants stand among the lavender fields of the south. Here, the mills are smaller, their stone walls bleached white by the mistral wind, but they possess a unique, musical secret: the pots. Along the edges of the sails, the millers would sometimes tie small, hollow clay jugs. As the sails spun through the dry Mediterranean air, the wind would blow across the mouths of these jugs, creating a low, haunting, fluting sound, a celestial organ played by the atmosphere itself. A row of windmills on a ridge would not just grind grain, they would sing a multi-toned harmonic chorus that could be heard for miles across the valley. It was the song of the harvest, a beautiful acoustic signal that the earth was giving up its bounty and the wind was there to help it transform. The haunting, hollow music of the clay pots drifts away, replaced by the sharp, metallic tang of the iron windmills of the American West, where the emitter became the most manufactured machine in human history. These were the tin giants, their blades made of thin, curved, galvanized steel that flashed like 1,000 mirrors in the desert sun. Unlike the heavy European mills that required a master to operate, these steel flowers were self-governing. They had a large vertical vane or tail that acted like a rudder. When the wind became too strong, the vane would automatically fold the entire wheel of blades out of the gear, turning it sideways so the wind would pass through harmlessly. This folding motion, was as graceful as a bird closing its wings before a storm, a mechanical surrender that ensured the mill would still be standing when the sun rose over the parched, quiet horizon. From the folding wings of the steel giants, we return to the internal, soft, bolting cloth of the flour room, where we find the secret of the miller's knot. Because the air in the mill was always thick with fine, explosive flour dust, the miller could never use a flame or a spark for light. Instead, he learned to work entirely by touch in the velvet darkness. He developed a way of tying heavy grain sacks with a single-handed lightning-fast knot that could be undone with one sharp tug, even if the hemp was wet or frozen. This knot became a secret handshake among the fraternity of millers, a silent, tactile language of the fingers. In the quiet of the night, you can almost hear the soft zip of the hemp cord and the heavy thud of the full sacks being stacked in the dark, a rhythmic, tactile dance of preparation that ensured that when the world woke up, the bread would be ready. This dark, tactile preparation leads us to the most ethereal of all windmill concepts, the windwright. In the Middle Ages, the wind was not considered free, it was the property of the lord or the church. A miller had to pay a wind tax for the right to catch the air that passed over his land. This led to the law of the shadow, where it was illegal to plant a tall tree or build a high house within a certain distance of a mill, lest it steal the wind's power. The space around a windmill was a sacred, invisible corridor, a protected highway for the breath of God. To stand in a mill yard was to stand in a place where the law of man and the law of the atmosphere were one and the same, a place where the invisible was more valuable than the tangible, and the air was more precious than gold. The invisible value of the air carries us finally to the resting stone. Every great mill has a stone near the door, a large smooth boulder where the miller would sit at the end of a long breezy day. As the sun set and the wind died down, he would rest his back against the cooling stone of the tower and watch the sails slow to a halt. He would feel the vibration of the machinery fading out of his own bones, a slow, winding down of the soul. The earth would grow quiet, the birds would settle in the thatch, and the great wooden arms would cast their final long shadows across the fields. This is the moment of the great peace, the moment when the work is finished, the taxes are paid, the grain is ground, and the only thing left to do is to close your eyes and listen to the world breathing in its sleep. The silence of the resting stone becomes your silence. The long shadows of the sails become the soft curtains of your eyes. The cool evening air of the polders becomes the air in your room, still and safe. The giant has stopped turning, the mill is at rest, and as the last echo of the gear teeth fades into the dark, you're carried away on the very last gentlest breath of the wind, into the deep, into the quiet, into the forever. The gentle, fading echo of the gear teeth dissolves into the profound, velvet silence of the high cap, where the massive weight of the windshaft rests upon its most critical hidden support, the journal or the neck. Imagine a colossal iron-bound cylinder of solid oak, several feet in diameter, polished by decades of rotation until its surface is as smooth as dark frozen water. This immense axle carries the multi-ton burden of the sails, and it must rest upon a bearing capable of withstanding the heat of 1,000 storms. In the oldest and most regal of mills, this bearing is not made of metal, but of a single, massive block of pure white marble or dense grey granite, quarried from the deep bones of the earth. The miller applies a thick cooling layer of tallow, and as the great sails turn outside, the iron neck of the shaft glides over the cold stone with a deep, liquid groan. In the darkness, if you listen closely, you can hear the microscopic shearing of the stone meeting the wood, a sound that feels like the very earth itself is turning under the weight of the sky. It is a place of immense pressure and absolute unyielding stability, where the heavy moving heart of the machine finds its ultimate solid home. The dark, cool weight of the stone bearing carries our senses upward, into the intricate skeletal ribs of the mill's crowning cap. To stand inside this space is to stand within the inverted hull of a great wooden ship, launched into the sea of the air. The master shipwrights who designed these structures used the same ancient techniques of the shipyard, curving massive rafters of green oak over open fires until they took on the elegant, aerodynamic shape of a boat's prow. These curved ribs of the roof are held together by hand-carved wooden pegs, allowing the entire structure to flex and shift under the terrifying pressure of the wind without ever snapping. As you gaze up at the dark, arched ceiling, the scent of tarred hemp and seasoned timber is overwhelming, a fragrant reminder of the centuries-old marriage between the sea and the sky. The cap does not just sit upon the tower, it floats, held aloft by the brilliant curved geometry of the forest, turning the mill into a vessel that sails forever on the currents of the atmosphere. And as you feel the strength of these ancient curved ribs surrounding you, a deep sense of protection settles over your mind. Like a sturdy ship in a quiet harbour, you are sheltered from the waves of the world, breathing deeply, drifting further into the safety of the dark. The protective arched ceiling of the cap casts a long historical shadow that stretches across the fields, a shadow once defined by the rigid invisible boundaries of the soak. In the medieval world, the windmill was not just a machine, but a legal fortress of feudal power. The law of the soak dictated that every farmer within the sight of the mill's sails was bound, by ancient decree, to bring their grain to that specific mill and no other. To grind your own grain by hand was a crime against the lord of the manor. This created a profound, invisible thread connecting every cottage, every barn, and every golden field to the turning arms of the giant on the hill. The windmill was the economic sun around which the entire village orbited, its slow, rhythmic rotation a constant reminder of the order, the law, and the shared survival of the community. To look at the mill was to see the heartbeat of the land itself, an immovable monument to the social contract that fed the kingdom. This heavy social gravity is lightened by the visual poetry of the sail's salute. When the workday ended or a moment of celebration arrived, the miller used the sails to speak to the horizon in a language of grand geometric gestures. By stopping the arms in a perfect upright plus shape, he signalled a short temporary rest, a pause for a meal or a moment of quiet reflection. But when the sails were stopped in the tilted X position, it was a signal of long-term rest, a deep, seasonal sleep during the fallow months. In some regions, the miller would even dress the sails in colourful ribbons for a wedding, or remove specific boards to create a broken silhouette for a funeral. Across the flat, misty plains, these towering signals were the first newspapers, a silent, wind-powered broadcast that told the story of births, deaths, and the simple, daily passage of life, a wooden alphabet written against the blue of the sky. The visual signal of the resting sails leads us back inside, where the warmth of the day's labour leaves a lingering physical mark known as the sweat of the stones. After hours of intense, high-speed grinding, the massive millstones become surprisingly hot to the touch, their ancient quartz surfaces radiating a deep, dry heat. When the damp, cool evening air finally enters the mill, moisture begins to condense on the cooling stones, creating a fine, shimmering mist that smells of toasted grain and wet earth. This sweat is a sign of a mill that has worked hard, a physical manifestation of the invisible energy that has passed from the wind, through the gears, and into the flour. To touch the stone in the twilight is to feel the fading pulse of the machine, a warm, humid silence that tells of a million individual grains transformed into the soft, white powder of life. While the stones settle into their warm, humid rest, the rhythmic chatter of the damsel begins to echo in our mind's memory. This is the small, upright wooden stick that sits atop the spinning millstone, clattering constantly against the grain tray as it turns. It was named the damsel because of its constant, talkative nature, providing a continuous, percussive heartbeat to the milling floor. Clack, 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 clack. This sound was the miller's primary guide, If the chatter slowed down, the wind was dying. If it became a frantic, high-pitched blur, the wind was rising to a dangerous gale. The damsel is the voice of the mill, a simple wooden instrument that translates the invisible speed of the atmosphere into a clear, rhythmic song. In the quiet of the night, the memory of that chatter acts as a hypnotic metronome, pulling you deeper into a rhythmic, steady trance, a sound of productivity that leads to the ultimate peace. And as the chatter of the damsel fades into a soft, distant pulse, you feel every muscle in your body responding to that rhythm, letting go with every imaginary beat. Clack, clack. Your breathing matches the slow, steady vibration, sinking deeper and deeper into the soft, warm grain of sleep. The vibrating chatter of the damsel is inextricably linked to the shoe, the sloping wooden tray that feeds the golden grain into the eye of the stone. Imagine a small wooden cradle suspended by leather thongs, constantly shaking and shivering under the touch of the spinning machinery. As the shoe vibrates, the grain slides forward in a thin, continuous stream, falling like golden rain into the dark, spinning centre of the stones. This vibration ensures that the grain never clogs, never stops, and never overwhelms the machine. It is a masterpiece of mechanical flow, a way of turning a static pile of grain into a living, moving current of energy. The sight of the sun catching the falling grain, turning each kernel into a tiny golden spark before it disappears into the dark eye of the stone, is one of the most mesmerizing sights in the ancient world. A constant pouring waterfall of potential, guided by the shivering hand of the wood. This shimmering golden movement carries our gaze to the very peak of the mill, where the weather vane stands silhouetted against the deepening indigo of the sky. Often shaped like a proud rooster, a galloping horse, or even a miniature wooden ship, the vane is the mill's crowning jewel. It is made of hand-hammered copper or heavy iron, turning silently on a greased spindle to catch the very first hint of a changing breeze. But in some coastal mills, the vane served a much more practical purpose. It was a telltale. By watching the vane from the gallery, the miller could see exactly how the air was tumbling over the nearby trees or hills, allowing him to adjust the angle of his sails to catch the most stable, laminar flow of the wind. The vane is the mill's sensory organ, a delicate turning needle that connects the heavy, grounded tower to the infinite, shifting directions of the vast and open sky. This silent turning needle of the weather vane eventually points us toward the most beautiful and terrifying of all windmill experiences, the Great Ice Storm. In the deep heart of a northern winter, freezing rain can coat the entire windmill in a thick crystalline skin of transparent ice. Every rope becomes a frozen rod, every sailcloth a rigid sheet of glass, and the massive wooden lattice arms become heavy with thousands of pounds of frozen water. When the wind begins to blow against a frozen mill, the sound is unlike anything else on Earth. A high-pitched, musical creaking of ice rubbing against wood, and the sudden, explosive crack of icicles shattering against the tower walls. The windmill becomes a giant frozen diamond standing motionless in a white, silent world. The miller must wait for the sun to return, for the slow, dripping thaw to release the gears from their icy prison. A time of profound, frozen patience where the machine and the winter become one. The frozen silence of the ice storm slowly, gently melts, turning into a soft, warm trickle of water that flows down the tarred weatherboards and into the dark, receptive earth. The giant is no longer a diamond. It is wood and stone once more resting in the damp, fragrant air of the thawing fields. The gears are quiet. The sails are empty. The heavy iron windshaft is still. You are the ice melting into the warmth of the bed. You are the water sinking deep into the quiet soil. You are the mill standing in absolute unshakable peace under the stars. The world is soft, the air is still, and as the last icicle falls and shatters in the grass, you drift away on a tide of pure, warm and total darkness. The melting water from the ice storm sinks quietly into the black soil. and as the earth drinks, the air above begins to ripple, a gentle, invisible current that follows the sweep line of the turning arms. If you could see the wind as it leaves the massive lattice of the sails, you would see it is no longer a straight path, but a beautiful, rolling vortex. As each arm sweeps through the sky, it leaves behind a spiraling wake of air, a gentle, swirling miniature galaxy of pressure and movement. This slipstream acts like a soft, invisible cushion, protecting the tower from the raw, jarring impact of the gusts. It is a masterpiece of fluid geometry, the wind itself being shaped and smoothed by the very machine that captures it, a swirling, rhythmic trail of breath that follows the giant in a continuous hypnotic spiral, moving away from the mill and into the open fields like the fading ripples on a dark, quiet pond. This invisible, spiraling trail leads our senses back into the dark, timbered heart of the mill, where the light of a single, flickering candle reveals a secret history written upon the very bones of the building. On the massive hand-hewn corner posts and the sloping rafters of the cap, the millers of the past have left their marks, a quiet wooden ledger of the centuries. You can see dates carved in shaky, elegant script: 1742, 1815, 1889, names of men who stood exactly where you're standing, watching the same gears turn in the shadows. There are apotropic marks too. Strange, beautiful geometric circles and hex foils carved into the oak to protect the mill from lightning and ill fortune. These carvings are filled with the fine, white flour dust of 100 years, making them glow softly in the dim light. The wood is not just a structural support, it is a witness, a deeply textured archive of human hope, labour and survival, holding the stories of the dead within the warm, resilient grain of the oak. And as the weight of these centuries settles softly into the room, the weight of your own day begins to dissolve. The ancient wood supports you. The deep history of the tower surrounds you. You are safe. You are held. You are perfectly at peace. The flickering candlelight on the carved beams leads us to the mechanical chatter of the fantail's hidden heart, the mesmerizing, microscopic world of the worm gear, while the massive mainsails move with a slow, majestic sweep. The little fantail at the back of the cap is a creature of high-speed, intricate precision. Its small white blades spin with a frantic, chattering energy, driving a long iron shaft that disappears into a heavy, grease-filled wooden box. Inside this box lies the worm gear, a spiraling, screw-like iron rod that meshes with a massive toothed wheel. The gear ratio here is staggering. The little fantail might spin 10,000 times just to move the colossal wooden cap a few inches toward the wind. It is a slow, silent, and incredibly powerful victory of mathematics over mass. The sound is a constant, tiny, rhythmic click, 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 as the iron screw bites into the wheel, a miniature mechanical heartbeat that ensures the giant is always, perfectly, instinctively facing the breath of the world. From the tiny, chattering gears of the fantail, we drift downward, falling through the open trapdoors to the grain bin, the great hollow wooden belly of the mill. To stand inside the bin is to be submerged in a sea of golden potential. Imagine thousands of bushels of hard red winter wheat piled high against the sloping wooden walls. The scent is overwhelming, a deep, earthy, sun-baked fragrance of dry straw and cooling soil. As you move your hand through the grain, it feels like heavy, liquid gold, smooth, cool, and incredibly dense. The sound of the wheat shifting as the mill vibrates is a soft, continuous hiss, like the sound of a distant ocean tide pulling back over a pebbled shore. It is a place of profound abundance, a warm, golden cavern where the raw energy of the sun, captured by the wheat in the fields, waits in the quiet dark to be transformed into the very substance of life. The hissing sound of the shifting grain carries us back outside, to the very base of the smock, where a heavy iron-shod tail wheel rests upon a circular stone track. In certain regions, the tail pole that rotates the cap is supported by a single, massive wheel made of solid elm or cast iron. As the wind shifts and the cap begins its slow, heavy rotation, this wheel rolls along a meticulously levelled path of flat granite stones. The sound is a deep, low-frequency rumble that vibrates through the very soles of your feet, a sound of monumental, crushing weight, moving with absolute directed purpose. The tailwheel is the anchor of the skyship, the point where the airy, turning heights of the cap make physical, grinding contact with the unyielding reality of the earth. It leaves a faint, polished line on the stones, a silver track of motion that maps the shifting winds of 1,000 seasons. As the heavy wheel rolls on the polished stone, your own journey rolls forward into the velvet dark, smooth, steady, unstoppable, every rotation drawing you further away from the noise of the world, every inch bringing you closer to the absolute stillness of deep, restorative sleep. The silver track on the stones leads us toward the miller's flower, not a plant that grows in the earth, but a delicate white ghost that lives in the shadows of the machinery. The flower moth, often called the miller by country folk, is a tiny, ethereal creature whose wings are coated in the same fine white dust as the miller's clothes. In the twilight, as the mill grows quiet, these moths emerge from the cracks in the wooden chutes, fluttering through the air like living flakes of flour. They're attracted to the soft, rhythmic vibration of the stones and the warmth of the grinding floor. To see a cloud of these white moths dancing in a stray beam of moonlight is to see the mill's own spirit taking flight. They are the silent, fluttering guardians of the harvest, their presence a sign of a clean, healthy mill, a delicate, powdery ballet that turns the industrial space into a dreamscape of soft, white wings. The fluttering of the white moths dissolves into the grease horn, the most essential personal tool of the ancient millwright. Hanging from a leather strap near the main windshaft is the hollowed-out horn of a great ox, polished by decades of use until it glows like amber. Inside this natural vessel is a thick, pungent mixture of rendered sheep's tallow and crushed graphite. The miller uses a long wooden spatula to apply this heavy black grease to the wooden cogs. The scent is visceral, a mix of animal fat, cold iron, and old forest. It is a ritual of preservation. As the grease is worked into the grain of the wood, it creates a surface that is harder than iron and smoother than glass. The grease horn is a symbol of the miller's intimate physical connection to his machine, a quiet, greasy alchemy that turns friction into harmony and ensures that the wooden teeth of the gears will never scream in the dark. The thick, protective scent of the tallow leads us to the most precise and delicate operation in the life of the stones, the wedge and feather. When a millstone becomes worn and uneven, it must sometimes be split or reshaped using a technique as old as the pyramids. The miller places a series of small curved iron plates, the feathers, into a crack in the stone, and then drives a thin iron wedge between them. With a heavy rhythmic hammer he strikes the wedges. Ping, ping, ping. The sound is high and musical, echoing through the empty stone tower like a bell. He is listening for a change in the note. When the tone shifts from a sharp ping to a dull thud, he knows the stone is about to yield. It is a moment of extreme tension and profound patience. The stone eventually parts with a soft, heavy sigh, revealing the ancient crystalline heart of the quartz, a secret geometry of the earth, opened once more by the patient hand of the man who listens to the wind. The musical ping of the iron wedge fades into the profound atmospheric silence of the ghost mill. Across the world there are thousands of windmills that have been abandoned to the elements, their sails lost to storms and their gears locked in a final rusting embrace. In these places the wind still visits, but it finds no work to do. It whistles through the empty window slits and rattles the skeletal remains of the lattice arms. Ivy crawls up the brickwork and owls nest in the high, dark rafters of the cap. To stand inside a ruined mill is to feel the weight of a machine that has forgotten its purpose, yet still holds its dignity. The air is thick with the scent of damp moss and slow decay. It is a place of absolute undisturbed rest, where the frantic energy of the harvest has been replaced by the slow, green pace of nature. The ghost mill is a monument to the great cycle, a reminder that all machines eventually return to the earth and the wind will still be blowing long after the last gear has turned, and as the ivy wraps softly around the silent wooden gears, so does sleep wrap its gentle green vines around your mind, pulling you down into the soft, quiet ruins of the day, where the work is finished, the noise has stopped, and only the slow, natural breath of the world remains. The silence of the ghost mill carries our gaze upward, through the collapsed roof and into the vast starlit theatre of the night sky, where we find the final truth of this journey, the celestial alignment of the tower. In the ancient world, the windmill was often used as a massive architectural sundial. Because the mill was built on the highest ground, its long sweeping shadow would travel across the fields with the precision of a clock. The farmers could tell the hour of the day by where the shadow of the sails fell upon a certain hedge or a specific stone wall, and at night the miller used the stars to orient his giant. He would align the main windshaft with the North Star, ensuring that his mill was perfectly mathematically tuned to the rotation of the planet itself. The windmill is not just a machine of the Earth, it is a child of the cosmos, a wooden compass that points the way through the dark, a steady, unmoving sentinel that stands at the intersection of the spinning stars and the blowing wind. The long shadow of the sails falls across your eyes, a soft, cool blanket of darkness that tells you the time for work has passed and the time for the stars has arrived. You are the shadow, you are the stars, you are the quiet, unmoving tower in the centre of the night. The wind is a whisper, the world is a dream, and as the planet turns slowly beneath you, you drift away into the infinite, the silent, and the deep. The long shadow of the sails falls across your eyes, a soft, cool blanket of darkness that tells you the time for work has passed and the time for the stars has arrived. And in that celestial stillness, we find ourselves drawn toward the ancient, weathered heart of the mill's most sacred interior, the stone floor. This is the sanctuary where the heavy rhythmic labour of the machine reaches its profound physical climax. The air here is unlike anywhere else on the planet. It is a thick, velvety suspension of fine, sun-warmed flower dust that hangs in the air like a localised interior fog. Every single surface, the massive oak floorboards, the heavy support beams, the iron-bound stone vats, is coated in a layer of this silken white powder, transforming the room into a monochromatic, dreamlike landscape. The dust softens the sharp edges of the world, dampening sound and making every movement feel as though it is happening beneath the surface of a calm white ocean. To stand here in the dim, golden light of late afternoon is to breathe in the very essence of the Earth's fertility, a soft, dry, powdery inhalation that tastes of ancient harvests and the slow, inevitable grinding of time itself. This powdery white silence carries our thoughts toward a hidden, architectural masterpiece that resides just beneath the dust, the bridge tree. Deep in the foundations of the stone floor, hidden away from the light, lies a colossal, horizontal beam of solid, seasoned heart oak, spanning the entire width of the tower. This beam is the absolute unshakable support for the ton-heavy millstone spinning above. It is not fixed in place, it is a living bridge, suspended by heavy iron chains and adjustable screws. Because the millstones must be kept in a state of perfect floating equilibrium, the bridge tree acts as the mill's own spine, absorbing the immense vibrating pressure of the grind and distributing it into the stone walls. It is a place of profound hidden strength, a massive wooden anchor that allows the stones to spin with the lightness of a dancer while holding the weight of a mountain. In the quiet of the night, you can almost hear the oak fibres of the bridge tree settling and groaning under the weight, a slow, deep wood melody of structural endurance and absolute grounded peace. And as you visualize the strength of this massive oak spine, you feel a corresponding strength in your own body, a steady, unshakable support that allows you to let go of every other tension. Your own spine feels long, heavy, and perfectly aligned, sinking deeper into the soft white dust of sleep. The heavy, grounded strength of the bridge tree leads us to a strange and beautiful phenomenon known as the mill wind. This is not the wind that blows from the north or the south, but a localized, rhythmic atmospheric disturbance created by the mill itself. As the four massive lattice-worked arms sweep through the air at high speed, they create a powerful, localized pressure wave, a pulse of air that can be felt hundreds of feet away. Across the quiet, still meadows, this pulse arrives like a slow, regular heartbeat. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A rhythmic compression of the atmosphere that feels like the world itself is breathing. It is a sound and a sensation that defines the very soul of the landscape, a physical manifestation of the invisible energy being captured. The mill wind doesn't just pass through the air, it organizes it, turning the chaotic gusts of the storm into a steady, percussive cadence that lulls the surrounding hills into a state of shared, rhythmic harmony. This rhythmic pulse of the air carries us toward the most delicate, microscopic material ever used in the service of the harvest, the bolting silk. Within the dark, wooden belly of the mill, the crushed grain must be sifted, and for centuries the only material capable of this refinement was the finest, most high-grade silk imported from the Far East. Imagine a long hexagonal drum covered in a translucent shimmering web of pure silk thread, so fine that a square inch contains 10,000 microscopic holes. As the wind turns the gears, this silken drum rotates, and the flower is thrown against the mesh. The silk feels like cool water against the skin, yet it is stronger than steel of the same diameter, vibrating with a high musical tension. In the dim light of the flower floor, the bolting silk glows with a faint iridescent sheen, a fragile, beautiful barrier that separates the rough husk of the world from the pure, white soul of the flower, a testament to the fact that the greatest power of the wind is often delivered through the most delicate of vessels. From the shimmering, delicate surface of the silk, we drift into the heavy, black, visceral reality of the pitch pot. Standing at the base of the great Dutch smock mills, the scent is undeniable, a thick, acrid yet strangely comforting aroma of boiling coal tar and pine resin. To protect the massive wooden weatherboards from the rotting humidity of the polders, the miller must periodically dress his tower in a new skin of black pitch. Heated over a slow, crackling peat fire, the pitch becomes a glossy, bubbling liquid that is painted over every inch of the oak. As it cools, it hardens into a deep, raven-black armour that smells of the sea and the forest combined. This black skin absorbs the heat of the sun, keeping the interior of the mill warm and dry even in the heart of a North Sea winter. To see a pitch-black mill standing against a field of bright green tulips is one of the most striking contrasts in the world. A heavy, tarred fortress of industry rising out of the soft, colourful fragility of the earth. The thick black scent of the pitch pot fades, melting into the cool, mineral aroma of the quarrier's mark. We travel deep into the heart of the French countryside to the ancient quarries of La Ferté-sous-Jouarre, where the world's most famous millstones were born. Here, the earth produces a unique porous quartz known as burr stone. It is a hard, white rock filled with tiny, microscopic cavities that act like natural teeth, never needing to be sharpened as they wear down. Each millstone is not a single rock, but a mosaic of several segments, or harps, fitted together with absolute precision and bound by a massive red-hot iron hoop that shrinks as it cools, locking the stones in an eternal embrace. If you look closely at the side of an ancient stone, you can see the faint chiselled mark of the quarrier who cut it 200 years ago, a small geometric signature hidden beneath the iron. These stones are the oldest, most tireless workers in the mill, carrying the memory of the deep earth into the daily life of the village. And as the memory of the deep earth settles into your mind, your breathing becomes just as steady, just as slow as the turning of the ancient stones. You're solid, you're ancient, you're deeply, wonderfully grounded. The quarrier's mark on the cold stone leads us back to the high, windy heights of the sway beam. This is the massive horizontal timber that sits atop the mill's cap, allowing the miller to physically steer the building. In the older post mills, the entire structure was balanced on a single point, and the sway beam acted like the rudder of a ship. By leaning his weight against this beam, the miller could feel the vibrations of the entire 50-ton building in his own spine. It is a point of ultimate sensitivity. If the wind hits the sails at the wrong angle, the sway beam will shiver and groan, sending a warning signal down through the wood. The miller and the beam are one, a single, sensing organism that understands the pressure of the atmosphere. To stand with your back against the sway beam is to feel the heartbeat of the storm, translated into a slow, rhythmic swaying that feels as natural and comforting as the rocking of a cradle in a quiet room. This swaying, cradle-like motion carries our perspective toward the grain hopper, the large funnel-shaped wooden box that sits directly above the spinning stones. Imagine a massive, square-sided cone built of polished pine, filled to the brim with millions of golden kernels of wheat. Because of the constant, gentle vibration of the mill, the grain in the hopper acts like a fluid. It ripples and flows in a continuous, mesmerizing spiral toward the center. If you place your hand on the surface of the grain, you can feel it being drawn downward by an invisible gravitational force. The sound is a soft, dry whispering. 1,000 tiny clicks as the kernels bounce and slide against the wooden walls. The hopper is the hourglass of the mill. A visual measurement of time and energy, where the harvest of the summer is slowly, steadily poured into the dark, grinding mouth of the machine to sustain the life of the winter. Following the downward liquid flow of the grain, we encounter the spindle, the long vertical iron spine that connects the gears in the roof to the stones on the floor. This rod is the most high-precision piece of metal in the ancient world. It must be perfectly straight, perfectly balanced, and perfectly vertical to within 1,000th of an inch. If it is even slightly out of true, the ton-heavy stones will wobble, striking sparks and destroying themselves in a violent, grinding catastrophe. The spindle sits in a cup of solid brass at the very bottom of the mill, submerged in a bath of cool, clear oil. As it spins at 100 revolutions per minute, it creates a faint, high-pitched singing sound, a mechanical soprano that floats over the deep, percussive bass of the wooden gears. It is the thread that holds the entire mill together. A single silver line of rotation that turns the wild horizontal power of the wind into the vertical productive work of the earth. The silver singing of the iron spindle leads us toward the canvas reef. When the workday ends and the wind begins to die, the miller must climb the latticework of the sails one last time to reef the cloth. This is a moment of profound, high-altitude silence. Standing 40 feet in the air on a wooden lath, the miller rolls the heavy, salt-crusted canvas into tight, neat bundles, securing them with hemp twine. The fabric is cold and damp with the evening dew, and as it is rolled, it releases the scent of the open sky, a clean, ozonic fragrance of ozone and distance. Once the sails are reefed, the mill looks skeletal and thin against the darkening sky. Its skin has been removed, and it stands as a bare wooden ghost waiting for the night. The sound of the last sail being tied, a sharp, final snap of the twine, is the signal that the giant is finally asleep. The final snap of the twine echoes into the distance. And as it fades, the wind itself seems to take a breath and hold it. The tower is bare. The stones are warm and silent. The silk is still. You are the miller, descending the final ladder into the warm, dark quiet of the lower floor. You feel the absolute heavy stillness of the tower around you, a fortress of wood and stone that has done its work. The world outside is a vast indigo mystery, but in here there is only the soft, lingering scent of flower and the deep, restorative quiet of a machine at rest. Your eyes close with the weight of 1,000 harvests, and as the last stray kernel of grain falls through the eye of the stone, you fall with it into the soft, white, infinite silence of a perfect sleep. The soft, white, infinite silence of a perfect sleep is not a void, but a living texture, a slow-motion immersion into the very cellular memory of the wood that forms the mill's skeletal heart. Within these massive, hand-hewn beams of English oak and Baltic pine, a secret life persists long after the sap has ceased to flow. We drift into the seasoning of the spirit, where the timber of the mill, exposed to decades of vibration and the constant rhythmic pressure of the wind, undergoes a profound molecular transformation. The wood becomes case-hardened, its fibres interlocking with such incredible density that it rings like a bell when struck with a mallet. This ancient oak doesn't just hold the building up, it remembers the storms it has weathered. In the absolute quiet of a winter night, as the temperature drops, the wood contracts with a series of sharp musical cracks that echo through the dark floors, the sound of the mill settling into its own history. It is a slow, organic maturation, turning the tower into a single unified instrument that is more stone than plant, more spirit than matter, perfectly aged, perfectly seasoned for the eternity of the night. The musical contraction of the timber leads our awareness outward, following the long, cooling shadow of the tower as it stretches across the silvered grass. This is the shadow dial of the plains, an invisible clock that has governed the rhythm of rural life for centuries. As the sun moves in its slow, golden arc across the sky, the towering silhouette of the mill acts as the world's largest gnomon. The villagers in the distant fields do not look at watches, they look at the tip of the sail's shadow. When the dark lines of the latticework touch the old stone bridge, it is time for the midday meal. When the shadow of the cap finally reaches the edge of the dark forest, the workday is done. The mill is the keeper of time, a monumental turning needle that stitches the passing hours into the fabric of the earth. Even now, in the moonlight, the shadow remains, a long, pale finger of darkness pointing toward the constellations, marking the silent passage of the universe while the world beneath it dreams. And as this celestial clock turns with a majestic, heavy grace, you feel the hours of your own day dissolving into the shadows. The frantic ticking of the world is replaced by the slow, sweeping movement of the stars. You are timeless, you're eternal, you're deeply, wonderfully still. The movement of the shadows toward the stars leads us to the polar alignment of the windshaft, the secret navigational geometry of the mill's head. In the ancient dark nights before the arrival of artificial light, the master millwrights would climb to the highest rafters of the cap to perform a silent astronomical ritual. They would align the massive iron windshaft with the North Star, the unmoving pivot of the heavens. This was not merely for luck, it was a way to ensure that the mill was perfectly true to the rotation of the planet. By anchoring the machine's primary axis to the one stationary point in the sky, the mill becomes a terrestrial extension of the cosmos. As the Earth spins beneath the stars, the mill feels that rotation in its very foundations, a subtle, gyroscopic stability that keeps the heavy gears from wobbling. To sleep within a mill is to sleep at the centre of a compass, perfectly oriented to the cold silver light of the north. A sanctuary of absolute mathematical direction in a shifting world. The cold silver direction of the stars vibrates down through the iron shaft, meeting the sympathetic resonance of the mill's interior. Every windmill possesses a unique acoustic fingerprint, a specific frequency at which the entire structure begins to hum in harmony with the wind. As the sails reach a certain velocity, the floorboards, the rafters, and the heavy stone walls all begin to vibrate at the exact same pitch. It is a deep subsonic drone that can be felt in the marrow of your bones before it is heard by the ears. This resonance is the voice of the building, a low, comforting growl that tells the miller his machine is in perfect health. When the mill finds its frequency, it stops fighting the wind and begins to dance with it, moving with an effortless rhythmic fluidity. The sound is like the humming of a distant colossal bee, a vibration that smooths out the edges of the mind and lulls every cell of the body into a state of total, resonant relaxation. And as you find your own frequency in the dark, the humming of the mill becomes the humming of your own breath, a steady, warm vibration that carries you away from the noise, sinking into the deep, resonant heart of the night. The deep, resonant vibration of the wood carries a scent that defines the physiological bond between the man and the machine, the white lung of the master miller. For 50 years, the miller has breathed the fine, suspended particles of the stive, the most microscopic dust of the ground wheat. This dust is not a pollutant. It is a soft, organic mist that coats the interior of the lungs, smelling of sun-baked fields and toasted yeast. Over time, the miller's very breath becomes a part of the mill's atmosphere. His heart rate naturally slows to match the 10 rotations per minute of the great sails. His movements become as deliberate and heavy as the turning of the stones. He does not operate the mill, he inhabits it. This profound biological connection turns the industrial process into a meditation, a shared life force between the breathing man and the turning wood. In the quiet of the evening, as the miller rests, his lungs continue to rhythmically cycle the fine white dust, a quiet, powdery exchange of energy that keeps the spirit of the harvest alive even in the stillness of sleep. This quiet, powdery exchange of breath leads us to the hub of the world, the massive iron-shod pole end, where the wild energy of the sky is finally captured and tamed. This is the absolute centre of the windmill's power, a colossal casting of blackened iron that holds the 4 great whips in a crushing, eternal grip. To stand before the pole end is to see the very face of the giant. It is cold, heavy, and smells of wet iron and old grease. From this single, unyielding point, the 50-foot arms radiate outward like the petals of a mechanical flower. The hub is the intersection of all forces, the horizontal push of the gale, the vertical weight of the timber, and the circular momentum of the spin. It is the place where the chaos of the atmosphere is organised into the order of the machine. The sheer, concentrated mass of the iron hub acts as a stabilising weight, a heavy, silent anchor that keeps the head of the mill from being torn away by the fury of the storm, a dark, metallic heart that beats with the strength of 1,000 horses. The dark, iron heartbeat of the hub echoes outward, creating a sonic veil that transforms the acoustic ecology of the surrounding countryside. A working windmill doesn't just make noise, it reshapes the silence. The rhythmic swish thump of the sails acts as a low-pass filter, drowning out the sharp, discordant sounds of the world, the barking of distant dogs, the clatter of wagons, the shouting of voices. Within a half-mile radius of the mill, the air is saturated with a steady, percussive pulse that creates a zone of profound auditory peace. This is the mill hush, a phenomenon where the continuous, predictable sound of the machinery allows the human brain to stop processing external stimuli and retreat into a state of internal focus. To live within the sonic veil of the mill is to be protected by a wall of sound, a gentle, rhythmic barrier that keeps the chaos of the world at bay, leaving only the steady, comforting measurement of the wind's breath. As the sonic veil wraps around you, every sharp thought is softened, every distant worry is muffled by the steady rhythmic pulse of the sails. You're insulated, you're protected, you're drifting in a world of soft rhythmic sound. The heavy percussive pulse of the wooden pass slowly, gracefully transforms into the high-tech silence of the carbon evolution. We drift through time, watching the heavy oak whips and canvas sails dissolve into the sleek, aerodynamic perfection of the modern turbine blade. These new giants are built of carbon fibre and glass-reinforced plastic, materials that are lighter than a feather yet stronger than the finest steel. Their shape is a masterpiece of computational fluid dynamics, a curve so perfect it can capture the energy of a breeze that a human would barely feel on their cheek. There are no gears here, no clattering damsels, only the silent liquid flow of electrons. But the spirit remains the same. The modern blade is the direct descendant of the Persian reed and the Dutch lattice, a bridge between the ancient wisdom of the earth and the invisible potential of the future. The silence of a modern wind farm at night is a new kind of music, a low, ghostly whistle of air passing over smooth composite, a song of clean, infinite energy that powers the lights of 1,000 sleeping cities. While the modern silence points toward the future, we're drawn back into the folklore of the rafters, the ancient superstitions that still live in the high, dark corners of the old timber mills. To the people of the past, the windmill was a living entity with its own moods and its own guardian spirits. It was common practice to place a witch's bottle, a small clay jar filled with iron pins and salt, beneath the main threshold to protect the mill from being cursed into a state of stillness. The millers believed that if the sails turned without grain in the stones, the clatter would summon ghosts into the cap. Because of this, a mill was never left to spin empty. There was always a handful of grain, a sacrifice to the wood, to keep the machine happy and the spirits at bay. The high rafters are filled with these small hidden tokens of luck: a dried rowan branch, an old horseshoe, a carved cross in the oak. These are the spiritual anchors of the building, the quiet folk magic that acknowledges the mystery of the power being caught from the sky. This mystery of power leads us finally to the point of final equilibrium, the absolute breathtaking balance of the upper millstone. We return to the grinding floor where the ton-heavy runner stone is spinning at full speed. In this moment of perfect operation, the stone is so perfectly balanced on its iron spindle that it could be moved by the touch of a child's finger. It is floating on a microscopic cushion of air and flour, defying its own immense weight to perform a task of surgical precision. There is no wobbling, no vibration, only a smooth, glass-like rotation that seems to defy the laws of physics. This is the zen of the mill, the point where mass, velocity and friction reach a state of total effortless harmony. The stone is moving at 70 miles per hour at its edge, yet it looks completely still to the naked eye. It is the ultimate goal of the miller's life, to create a machine so perfectly tuned that it achieves the absolute stillness of motion. The absolute stillness of the spinning stone becomes your stillness. The perfect balance of the machinery becomes the perfect balance of your mind. You are the stone, moving with incredible speed yet remaining perfectly centered. You are the wood, seasoned by the storms yet remaining perfectly strong. You are the iron, cold, and steady in the dark. The final truth of the wind is not in the movement, but in the peace that the movement creates. The 100th truth is a circle, returning to the beginning, returning to the earth, returning to the quiet. The giant has found its equilibrium. The wind is a whisper. The world is a dream, and as the last gear settles into its slot, you settle into the infinite, the silent, and the deep. The absolute breathless stillness of the spinning stone leads us finally to the most profound and secret truth of all, the 101st wonder, which is the mystery of the echo of energy. We often think of the windmill as a machine that consumes the wind, but the reality is far more beautiful and philosophical. As the invisible currents of the atmosphere strike the heavy canvas sails, the wind is not lost, it is not destroyed. It is merely invited to dance for a brief, monumental moment. The energy that once travelled across vast, lonely oceans and over jagged, snow-capped peaks is channeled through the oak and the iron, transformed into the warmth of the grinding stones and the life-giving dust of the flour. But then, as the air passes through the lattice work and leaves the mill behind, it returns to the sky, carrying with it the microscopic signature of the timber and the rhythm of the harvest. Every breath of wind that has ever turned a mill still exists in the great swirling tapestry of the planet's atmosphere. The wind that ground the grain for the pharaohs of Egypt, the gales that drained the polders of the Dutch masters, and the dry thermals that turned the white giants of La Mancha. They are all still here, flowing around us in a continuous, eternal loop of motion and memory. The windmill is the great translator, the bridge between the infinite, chaotic energy of the cosmos and the finite, beautiful needs of a single human life. It teaches us that nothing is ever truly wasted, and that we are all part of a magnificent turning cycle that began long before the first stone was quarried and will continue long after the last sail has weathered away. To stand in the shadow of the mill is to stand at the intersection of time and eternity, realizing that the very breath you take tonight is part of the same great wind that has powered the world since the dawn of time, and as this final profound truth settles into the deep, fertile soil of your subconscious, the heavy architecture of the mill begins to dissolve into the soft velvet texture of the night. You no longer need to listen. You no longer need to wonder. Your mind has absorbed the 101 truths as effortlessly as the oak absorbs the oil. The great wooden arms have finished their sweep, the iron brake is locked, and the massive tower is at one with the cooling earth. Feel the weight of your body sinking, drifting, becoming as solid and as peaceful as the ancient stone foundations. The rhythm of the gears is now just the rhythm of your heart, steady, slow, quiet. The air in your room is still and safe, protected by the memory of 1,000 tarred weatherboards and the strength of 1,000,000 hand-carved pegs. There is no more work to be done. The harvest is gathered, the grain is safe in the dark, and the wind has become a soft, distant whisper that only speaks of rest. You are floating on a dark, quiet ocean of history, carried by the gentle, invisible currents of a dream. The stars are watching, the earth is turning. And you are perfectly, beautifully centered in the heart of the great peace. Every cell of your being is now in equilibrium, balanced, supported, and free. The light is gone, the shadows have merged, and the giant is still. Your journey through the wood, the stone, and the sky has reached its final, quiet destination. There is only the dark, only the warmth, only the deep, and now 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.